There are some things human beings aren't meant to know, and it's the sworn duty of the SCP Foundation to discover and contain such information. But sometimes knowledge is discovered that shakes even the Foundation itself to its very core. One such discovery occurred on April 28, 2016. That night, SCP-2935 made itself known to the Foundation personnel. To this day, the exact nature of SCP-2935 is a mystery that even the Foundation's brightest minds can't completely understand. Everything we know about SCP-2935 today comes from 3 doomed missions to the anomalous zone's interior. This is the story of those infamous expeditions. The nightmare began around 5 a.m. when SCP Foundation Site-81 in Bloomingdale, Indiana, intercepted a distorted radio signal. Communications personnel at the site traced this strange signal back to the unincorporated area of Joppa, Indiana, near U.S. Interstate 70. As is Foundation policy, a team of field agents were dispatched to the location in order to determine what they were dealing with. However, rather than finding anything that could logically produce such a signal, they instead discovered a long-abandoned cemetery. The most recent death on any of the tombstones was recorded as being over 100 years ago, all the way back in 1908. On further investigation, the Foundation discovered an unmapped limestone cave opening beneath the cemetery, and when they sent a drone into the depths of the cave, it appeared to quickly exit out the other side of the cave. But something wasn't right. The area that the drone was observing appeared consistent with the landscape from which it entered, but now it looked somehow grayer. It lacked the color of life of the place it just come from. The grass was dead, there were no trees, no shrubs, no animals or birds in the sky. They weren't looking at our world, they were looking at a strange reflection of our world on the other side of the cave. In fact, it wasn't a cave at all, it was a passageway between 2 dimensions. It was SCP-2935. Just then, they were able to unscramble the distorted transmission they'd been receiving. It went as follows. This is an automated emergency broadcast from the SCP Foundation and your national government. One or more of our sites is experiencing a communication breakdown, likely due to a containment breach of unknown magnitude. All citizens are ordered to stay in their homes as containment teams work to secure the breach. This message will broadcast from April 20th, 2016 until… At that point, the message would cut and repeat, as it had for 8 straight days. The message source? Site-81, but not this Site-81. The SCP Foundation was receiving an emergency distress signal from themselves in another dimension, a bizarre event that even the Foundation had never experienced before. Field agents were terrified by the implications of what they just heard and contacted Site-81 Command to request additional units. The Foundation wished to fully understand this anomaly as quickly as possible due to the potential threat it could pose toward the Foundation, so they dispatched Mobile Task Force Epsilon 13, codenamed Manifest Destiny, to perform the first of 3 manned missions into the heart of the anomalous zone. The first exploratory mission into SCP-2935 was codenamed Gauntlet and consisted of a 4-man team fitted with full hazmat suits and direct video and audio links to Mission Command. The team was led by a field operative known only as Agent Juno. His subordinates were Agents Kale, Devon, and Underwood. Their directive was to gather samples and survey the area positioned directly around the insertion point, meaning the other cave mouth of SCP-2935. The mission only lasted about an hour, but what they saw in there would stay with these men for the rest of their lives. After a 15-minute trek through the cave, Manifest Destiny arrived in the mirror dimension, where they were struck by the eerie silence of a place that seemed identical and yet so different from their home dimension. The first observation they made was the total absence of all living vegetation. Trees, grass, weeds, everything, it was all dead. On orders from their superiors back in the original dimension, that we'll refer to from here on as Dimension Prime, Manifest Destiny headed deeper into the mirror dimension of SCP-2935. They traveled 2 kilometers without detecting a single sign of plant or animal life, not even insects. Eventually, they came upon a farmhouse with 2 cars parked outside. With authorization from Command, Manifest Destiny breached the house and headed inside. Agent Kale confirmed that there was still power flowing to the building, as the lighting appeared to work just fine, but they came upon a horrifying discovery in the house's dining room. 3 adult corpses, 2 female, 1 male, were seated at the table. A 4th corpse, that of a male child, was sprawled out on the ground nearby. As if the death of what looked to be an entire family wasn't awful enough, the Manifest Destiny team noticed a number of other alarming details. There were no signs of decomposition on the bodies, nor did there appear to be any obvious cause of death. The family's last meal was still on the table: chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans. While the food looked cold and stale, there was no evidence of rot or spoiling. The team found an open newspaper dated April 19, 2016, illustrating that the family may have died a full 8 days before the discovery. In Dimension Prime, decay would already be very well underway by that point, yet here there wasn't even a smell. Instead, everything was just covered in a thin layer of dust. Command requested that Manifest Destiny collect samples of the food as well as hair, skin, and fluids from the corpses for further study. Small electronics like smartphones were also taken from the bodies. Agent Devon turned on the television in the living room and found that while most stations were now running test signals, the shopping channel was still live. Well, the feed was live at least. Both hosts sat in front of the cameras dead, but perfectly preserved. The date on the screen read April 28, 2016. Suggesting that the times of Dimension Prime and Mirror Dimension were exactly the same. In fact, everything seemed the same, the only difference between the two dimensions being that some kind of mysterious apocalyptic event had occurred in the last 8 days in SCP-2935's Mirror Dimension, but exactly what had happened or how remained a mystery. When Manifest Destiny exited the farmhouse, they once again remarked on the lack of all signs of life around them. At this point, the team returned to the insertion point of SCP-2935, but were instructed to remain in the Mirror Dimension while additional units joined them inside. Manifest Destiny swelled to 16 members, with the notable addition of Agent Roy as the new commanding field officer. The team split into 2 groups of 8, and Agent Roy and his men infiltrated the Mirror Dimension Site-81, while Agent Juno's detachment attempted to access the base's off-site deep storage servers. This second expedition was codenamed Overland, and led the Foundation's field agents even deeper into the terrifying mystery of SCP-2935. Accessing the site was easy for Roy's detachment. It seemed there were relatively few cars on the road at the time of the mysterious extinction event. In the distance, fire still smoldered in the wreckage of planes that looked to have just dropped out of the sky. Agent Roy and his team, like all SCP Foundation personnel, were fitted with vitals trackers, and they assumed that the distress signal that started this whole thing could have been triggered by the deaths of every member of the Foundation at once in the Mirror Universe. Once inside Site-81, they realized that the assumption was probably right. Going door to door in the administrative wing, they found the perfectly preserved corpses of everyone they knew to be stationed there in Dimension Prime. People who were without a doubt still alive in their universe. Samples from the corpses that the Foundation would later study even confirmed the reason that the bodies were perfectly preserved. The corpses had experienced complete and sudden death on a cellular level, and even the bacteria that would typically take part in the decomposition process had died with it. In SCP-2935, death was total and absolute, across all types of life forms. As Agent Roy's team ventured further into the bowels of Site-81, they made another unsettling discovery: their own corpses, in roughly the same spots they'd been inside Dimension Prime Site-81 8 days prior. Some of the Foundation's top scientists, including the esteemed Dr. Bright, were also found dead inside the facility. In an attempt to see just how far this unexplained phenomenon stretched, Agent Roy's team decided to inspect the containment cells, where they found that all the Mirror Universe's SCPs, including SCP-2996, were dead. In his desperation to find some kind of exception to the extinction event, Agent Roy revealed a terrifying secret to the rest of his team. SCP-682, the immortal misanthropic lizard and one of the deadliest creatures known to the SCP Foundation, was contained at this very facility right below them. Could it have something to do with what was going on here? They descended into the containment facility to discover an even more unsettling truth. SCP-682, the unkillable anomaly, floated dead in its tank. Death truly made no exceptions within SCP-2935. Agent Roy's team left the site and rendezvoused with Agent Juno's team to send their research back to Dimension Prime using automated drones. Both teams remained in the Mirror Dimension for another manned operation codenamed 19. They had no idea it would be their final mission. As they descended deeper into the facility, passing more dead SCPs, they discovered one final clue. Based on the activity of the Foundation servers, the event occurred at roughly 3 a.m. While underground in SCP-2935 Site-81, the team accidentally activated the base's on-site nuclear weapon, a failsafe meant to be detonated in the case of an emergency containment breach. Due to the base's failsafe protocols, every member of the Manifest Destiny team was locked and sealed inside Site-81. They, along with everything else, were incinerated in the nuclear blast. Once again, the mirror universe inside of SCP-2935 was lifeless. But that isn't where it ends. When the automated drones returned out of the SCP-2935 cave to the field operations in Dimension Prime, they were in for their own horrifying discovery. None of the footage or information gathered from SCP-2935 illuminated how or why the extinction event occurred. Everyone and everything simply dropped dead at the exact same moment. Nobody was aware, nobody was prepared. Death came suddenly and silently, and none were spared. All the Foundation on Dimension Prime were left with was a message from one of the agents from Manifest Destiny, Agent Keller. His final message was, "I don't have any answers. I don't think there are any. I'll do this one thing and hope that fixes it. Seal it shut. You've got to lock it in here with us. I'm sorry." The Foundation were at first confused by this until they discovered a final encrypted audio log buried in the files recovered from the Mirror Universe's Site-81. It was a message from Keller himself, but not the Keller from Universe Prime. In this message, Keller described the Foundation in the Mirror Universe receiving the exact same distorted transmission that they did a few days earlier from a cave in Joppa. When he and the others were dispatched inside, they discovered the same lifeless post-extinction event world that was now so familiar to the Foundation command. But there was a key difference. This wasn't the mirror dimension they'd just been studying, but a third, entirely different dimension. In his haunting final words, Mirror Dimension Keller admits that whatever caused the event in that third dimension, an entity in that mirror dimension Keller believed this was the specter of death itself and had followed him back into his world, and history had repeated itself. SCP-2935 was the passageway through which absolute death could pass from dimension to dimension, and our dimension was the next in line. The deaths of Manifest Destiny may have saved our entire universe, as anyone passing back through the cave had the potential to bring death itself back with them. The Foundation decided in the end to follow Keller's advice. They sealed the entrance to SCP-2935 with concrete and now kept it under constant watch, since what waits behind the barrier is an entity even they have no power to stop if it ever got through. After all, it had killed them all before, or at least another version of them. What's one more dimension on the pile? Why, it may now just seem like a simple slab of concrete under an abandoned cemetery. This is why SCP-2935 might be the most dangerous SCP of all.
London is the second largest city in Europe, and underneath this bustling city is one of the oldest and largest networks of train tunnels in the world. But that's not the only huge old structure located beneath the city of London. Below even the deepest underground metro stations of this historic city, there's a whole artificial world of surveillance cyborgs, impossible architecture, and stomach-churning nutritional supplements. So be sure to mind the gap, because we're about to take you on a tour of SCP-1678, also known as UnLondon. SCP-1678 is located 1 kilometer below the city of London, England. From all appearances, it seems to be an exact copy of the city, though aesthetically, it's more in line with how it was around the turn of the 20th century. Gas streetlights stand on every corner, and the modern skyscrapers of the business district are recreated in the style of Victorian architecture. The epicenter of construction appears to be the Houses of Parliament, which is evidenced by the more unfinished and flawed the city becomes further out from the center one goes. Some of the buildings are made of nonsensical materials like copper pipes, and some of the gas lamps are nothing more than a ball of disembodied light floating atop a metal pole. The first big question that the Foundation had upon discovering this location was, of course, why on earth was it created? And they wouldn't have to look far, as an explanation of this bizarre mirror city plays automatically upon entering. My fellow citizen, if you are hearing this tape, then the world as we know it is finished. The sky has broken, the ground heaves with the tramp of terrible feet, and all the horror and madness from the dark corners of the world has broken free to exact its vengeance on the world of man. Evil has raised its bloody flag upon all nations of the world and crowned its unholy victory to the broken sky. Yes, this is the end. But there is a new hope. Welcome to UnLondon, a city of survivors, a city of the free. Together, fellow citizen, we will wait and prepare for the new beginning, the grand new world that is soon to come. Let the world above burn, we will endure. Let the monsters have their world, we will prepare, we will wait. And I tell you, citizen, that there will be a new morning, and you will emerge from UnLondon and stand blinking in the sun. And on that day, citizen, There shall be a new order as we raise the Union flag over the entire world. I welcome you to UnLondon, the last city and the first. From this message, it seems that this mirror city was built to be a refuge for survivors of an apocalyptic scenario. But the SCP Foundation had no knowledge of such a plan. In fact, it's still unknown who created this place, or how they did it. The one fact that was evident to the Foundation was that even though this strange place was intended to be a safe haven, it was far too poorly constructed to actually act as one. Illumination was unreliable, and most of the buildings were damp and infested with mold. It's also unclear to the Foundation where the oxygen and gas supply of UnLondon was coming from. Throughout the day, the loudspeakers around UnLondon play automated messages such as, "No one is safe from the influence of mimetic beings. Bryson's Home for the Poor is here to help." And, "Crime will not be tolerated in UnLondon. The tormentors of society will become its defenders." At the end of every hour that passes, the speakers announce the time, followed by, "And all is well." When the SCP Foundation first entered UnLondon, it was unknown whether or not any living things inhabited the city. On first investigation, it seemed from its state of disrepair that the city had been long abandoned. But soon, the Foundation met their first inhabitant of the underground city. Mobile Task Force members were inspecting the area around the Houses of Parliament when they discovered what looked to be a bank. As they approached the doors, they heard the following announcement over the nearby loudspeakers. "Citizen, you are entering a restricted area. Have your authorization papers ready. A bobby will arrive to escort you shortly." This signaled the approach of SCP-1678-A, also known as the Bobbies. A single instance of SCP-1678-A appeared with the unmistakable sound of a police whistle, and as soon as it arrived, it started attacking the members of the task force. Another announcement came over the speakers. "Police, halt! Criminal!" The Bobbies are the main threat to visitors in UnLondon, and they will attack on sight with any improvised weapon they can find. True to their name, they are all dressed in uniforms consistent with those of London City police officers from the Victorian era. What sets them apart from their historical counterparts is their construction. These beings are made out of human corpses, crudely dismembered at the joints, and reassembled using metal hinges and bolts with their heads wrapped in bandages. Bobbies are extremely hard to kill, with only high-caliber rounds and explosive weapons being effective at putting them down. Autopsies of dead bobbies have shown that underneath the police uniform, the bobbies all wear prison inmate-style jumpsuits. This adds a chilling context to the announcement about the tormentors of society becoming its defenders. It appears that the bobbies are the reanimated bodies of prisoners. In addition to the bobbies, the Foundation cataloged two additional forms of artificial life present within UnLondon. First are SCP-1678-B, or Eyes in the Sky, hybrid biomechanical birds made of flesh with an exoskeleton of copper wiring. Some of these creatures are covered in a deteriorating outer layer of plastic and feathers, suggesting that they were originally meant to resemble pigeons. As their name suggests, Eyes in the Sky serve as a type of surveillance drone, and while they have no offensive capabilities, they still pose a significant threat to the Foundation. It's still unclear whether they're able to communicate with or summon the Bobbies, but the SCP Foundation takes no chances. The last life form present in SCP-1678 is the strangest and the most frightening, SCP-1678-C, known as the Wretch. The Wretch has only ever been encountered outside the zone, which is now under SCP Foundation control, and it's uncertain how many instances of this being exist. The Wretch resembles an old woman, or sometimes old man, dressed in filthy rags. The Wretch sits at street corners holding a begging tray, and will attempt to elicit pity from anyone who happens to walk by. The Wretch will ask for food or money, but if food is supplied, it will start weeping before vanishing into a puff of black smoke. On a few occasions, audio notices playing on the city's loudspeakers have alluded to this being, saying, "Do not pity the Wretch. Allow them to pay the price of their betrayal for all eternity." The current Foundation protocol with regards to the Wretch is to not engage with it at all. In addition to the Bobbies, the Eyes in the Sky, and the Wretches, there's another strange component to the world of UnLondon. Throughout the city, in any area designed for human habitation, the Foundation discovered multiple machines that resembled modern gas pumps. These machines are fitted with coin slots and rubber hoses that, when coins are inserted, dispense a porridge-like substance advertised as Dr. Goody's Wonder Food. According to posters around the city, Wonder Food is a meal replacement supplement, supposedly containing all of the required nutrients for survival. Wonder Food also appears to be the only food source available in UnLondon. Despite the claims by various posters around the city that Wonder Food contains all the nutrients you need and completely restores health and vitality, examination of this substance has revealed that it is, much like the rest of UnLondon, unsuitable for sustaining life. Tests have confirmed that Wonder Food is a synthetic starch gel heavily enriched with various minerals, vitamins, fats, and bulking agents, and it contains artificially engineered DNA helix structures. While it does contain all the elements required for short-term survival, consuming the product for longer than 6 weeks will result in severe malnutrition and eventually scurvy. Further tests have shown that Wonder Food also contains psychoactive properties. The porridge contains a mixture of unknown molecular compounds which, through regular consumption, make subjects calmer, less anxious, and less likely to resist authority. It also seems to have been engineered to cause withdrawal symptoms that set in if a person stops eating it, symptoms which include headaches and depression. Foundation personnel are forbidden to consume Wonder Food, but the substance is highly attractive to instances of SCP-1678-B and 1678-C. Like most things in UnLondon, the quality of Wonder Food varies wildly, with some dispensers putting out a product that is so degraded that it can cause sickness, deformities, or even death in the consumer. But strangely, the Foundation has also recorded a type of unknown colorful mollusk which feeds on spillage from the Wonder Food dispensers. At present, UnLondon is only partially contained. Mobile task forces Tau 4 and Epsilon 6 have succeeded in establishing a perimeter around the Hyde Park district, where they have managed to stop any incursion from SCP-1678-A. Even though this is the only area that is fully under Foundation control, explorations have been conducted of buildings outside that perimeter. The investigations are vital for the Foundation's main purpose in UnLondon, which is figuring out who built it and exactly what kind of event this underground mirror city was meant to prepare for. The interior of the Natural History Museum yielded particularly strange insights into the purpose of UnLondon. For the most part, the museum is close to how it appears in the above ground, but with one key difference. The task force investigating the museum discovered an exhibit called The Fall of Man, exactly where the Darwin wing should have been. The exhibit, as its name suggests, details the apocalyptic scenario that would have theoretically driven people underground into UnLondon. But to everyone's surprise, its dioramas and displays didn't depict an asteroid impact, plague, or nuclear Armageddon. To the Foundation Task Force members, the scenes of destruction depicted in the exhibit were far more familiar. They recognized the reptilian form of SCP-682, the ordinary-looking brownstone basement door that serves as a gateway to SCP-2317, and, most chillingly, the imposing many-eyed figure of the Scarlet King. These were only some of the known Keter-class SCPs depicted in the museum exhibit. It was clear that even though the SCP Foundation hadn't built this city, whoever did knew a lot about the SCP Foundation's activities. It's believed by the Foundation that whoever or whatever created UnLondon still resides in the Houses of Parliament, and the ultimate goal of the task forces is to infiltrate the building. But in order to do that, they will first need to find where the bobbies are made and halt their production. It's believed that Bryson's home for the poor is where they originate from, but it's unclear exactly where the materials to make them come from, nor is it clear just how they're produced. Ultimately, the Foundation's goal is to catalog the entire city, and once they have stopped the production of more bobbies, MTF Tau 4 and Epsilon 6 will storm the Houses of Parliament and contain whatever force has created UnLondon. But London is a very big city, and UnLondon is just as big, so there's no telling what else they might find exploring this bizarre location. For more than 100,000 years, humanity has buried their dead. We commit the bodies of our deceased to the ground, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, in the hope that one day our dearly departed might get to enjoy some form of eternal life. But eternal life might be less appealing than it sounds. Perhaps there's a reason that humans bury their dead. Maybe it's so that the dead stay buried And luckily, they do, at least most of the time. Accessible only via a cargo elevator, and not marked on any official Foundation blueprints, beneath the northwest corner of Overwatch Command lies SCP-5555. This SCP isn't a creature or carnivorous monster. It's not a gateway to another dimension or an entity with the power to rewrite the very fabric of reality itself. No, SCP-5555 is a mass grave filled with corpses, a pit of unknown origin and indeterminable death. Each body exhumed from within SCP-5555 shows various anomalous traits. These bodies can be removed from the mass grave without any incident, but given the incalculable depth of this vast corpse-filled pit, continued excavation of SCP-5555 would likely only reveal further bodies and fewer answers as to how they came to be buried beneath the Foundation's Overwatch Command. The bodies recovered during the initial excavation of SCP-5555 vary in their physical attributes, as well as their causes of death, when one can even be determined. One body appears to be a man whose age and ethnicity are both unclear, as is how he died, but his body is perfectly preserved, showing no signs of decomposition. Another of the corpses has its head covered with a burlap sack and a noose tightened around its neck. When these are removed, they reveal an identical noose and sack underneath. When those are removed, they reveal another, and on and on and on. The cause of death in this instance is at least apparent: strangulation, suggesting that the deceased was intended to suffer before their death. Some of the other bodies removed from the pit include one belonging to a middle-aged Alutiiq woman, whose entire skeleton is formed of ice that doesn't melt under increased temperatures, while a different body is a human male with 80% of its organs surgically replaced with artificial ones, driven by gears and mechanisms that continue to tick away long after death. An adolescent female with dark blue skin has two severed hands grasping its throat, while a Caucasian woman was found with both of her eyes gouged out. Perhaps most curious of all is the coffin, crafted from black stone that cannot be opened. All attempts to open it have been resisted by some form of internal force keeping the coffin shut. While it's unable to be opened, it is believed to contain a human inside, a coffin with a person inside of it. Those familiar with the objects contained by the Foundation may make a connection to SCP-076 Able, a humanoid entity also contained inside a coffin. A curious connection too, as you'll come to see when dealing with SCP-5555, the appearance of many familiar faces may be more than just vague connections. None of these corpses, or their various anomalous properties, answer any of the pressing questions about SCP-5555's exact nature and origin. In fact, the bodies found within the grave only raise new questions about this seemingly bottomless pit that the Foundation was either built over or knowingly hides beneath its lowest depths. The truth behind SCP-5555 is shrouded in mystery. Unanswered questions piled on top of each other like the bodies in the mass grave itself, a pile that stacks all the way up to the highest levels of the Foundation's own administration. In actuality, the bodies buried in SCP-5555 are part of a vast and insidious game, played by the heads of a number of GOIs, or groups of interest, as well as the SCP Foundation's very own administrator. But how do the corpses of these anomalous beings factor into the aforementioned game? And what is the ultimate outcome? Examining the file describing SCP-5555, albeit with adequate O5 security clearance, answers some of these burning questions about the mystery at play. Dr. Everett Mann, the current O5-1, was the first to uncover the existence of SCP-5555 and the corpses contained within it. Mann created a series of notes detailing his findings, intended for his successor. In these, Mann claimed that the administrator, one Francis Fritz Williams, the only figure with authority above that of the O5 Council, blackballed him, meaning Fritz Williams had voted against allowing Dr. Mann to remain a member of the SCP Foundation. Everett Mann had believed the administrator to be his friend, so naturally, it came as a surprise when Fritz framed him for an elaborate plot to eliminate Mann's fellow Overseer Council members. Based on the information from his own O5-1 predecessor, Mann believed whoever took up the role after he was voted out would have to take up the role of killing Fritz for the good of the Foundation. But what connection between Fritz and a pit full of anomalous corpses could possibly warrant Mann's urging his successor to eliminate the Foundation's administrator? Dr. Mann's notes to his successor continued with detailed instructions as to how they would go about killing Fritz, and that firstly, they would require a lair. Mann himself was holed up in an isolated Arctic shack for 3 decades after being blackballed by the administrator, before Fritz sent his own private death squad after the former overseer. Mann stressed the importance of having a defensible, isolated location, stocked with armed guards and traps for his successor to lie in wait for Fritz. It was because of the traps Mann had set in his shack that he was able to escape Fritz's death squad with his life. Secondly, Mann urges his new O5-1 successor to always have several escape plans in place, and to be prepared to leave the lair, or indeed any other location at any time. Dr. Mann also suggested telling falsified escape plans to close friends, in case Fritz got to them first, or finding an SCP that allows the new O5-1 to teleport to safety. Third, Mann suggests the need for multiple fully stocked safe houses. After all, escape plans are entirely pointless unless you've got somewhere secure to actually escape to. Everett Mann also suggested, much like his advice with escape plans, to have fake safe houses or SCP anomalies on hand to get you to the real ones. How does one obtain access to an SCP? According to Mann, placing moles or blackmailing personnel within every Foundation facility is one way, as doing so granted him access to SCP-268, a hat that makes its wearer practically invisible, which came in handy during his escape. Of course, installing your own trusted moles is a potentially tricky feat to accomplish, given that Fritz has the entire Foundation and many other groups of interest in his thrall. But if anyone has the power to do so, and by extension the power to bring Fritz down, it would be another Overseer. Of course, Mann's plot to eliminate Fritz and highly detailed words of warning to his successor do little to explain the pit full of anomalous corpses. Contained within the file for SCP-5555 is an email to the Foundation's administrator from the CEO of Wondertainment, an anomalous toy manufacturer and one of a number of groups of interest to the Foundation. In it, the CEO congratulates Fritz on an excellent win and asks for a copy of an unknown file, as well as mentioning the leaders of other groups of interest, such as the Church of the Broken God. According to the email, this unidentified file was to be sent physically as opposed to electronically, giving Dr. Mann his next lead in uncovering the mystery of SCP-5555. Mann traveled to the headquarters of Wondertainment, Wonderworld, to retrieve the file using his special hat to avoid detection. Seems like an easy enough task, except Wonderworld is a pocket dimension that slowly transforms human beings into something else. Time working against him, Mann hastily made his way to Wonder Tower and attempted to recover the file that would maybe give him all the answers to this bizarre, twisted mystery. Unfortunately, Wondertainment's CEO, Dr. Holly Wondertainment, got to him first. Confronted by Dr. Wondertainment, Everett Mann demanded to know who was involved in the scheme, besides her and the administrator. He posited that the O5 Council might be somehow involved, but Dr. Wondertainment claimed that the game being played was above and beyond their little numbers club. Holly proceeded to point a large acid-filled super soaker at Mann and ordered him down onto his knees when they asked what purpose of the mass grave SCP-5555 was. Following a fight and the apparent death of Dr. Wondertainment, Mann escaped Wonderworld with the file, containing an updated version of the SCP-5555 description and containment procedures. The key points featured in this SCP-5555 document are mentions of sealing the mass grave with concrete after completing the turnover and re-establishing the facade. It also mentions that any already cataloged SCP entering the pit will die, with its personality, attributes, and any anomalous qualities being passed on to a new entity. which will appear close to the location of the initial SCP's discovery. So the pit can not only kill any SCP that enters it, but can also instantly recreate them, with slight differences, and reposition them. Does this mean the bodies in SCP-5555 are those of former SCPs? To answer that, we'll have to take another look at the corpses. Let's take a look at some of these bodies and try to make some connections. We already discussed the similarities between the coffin and SCP-076 Abel, the entity who also rests inside a large black coffin. Next, we have a corpse dressed in yellow, with a burlap sack covering its head, tightened in place with a noose. And removing it causes another sack and another noose to appear under it. If you ask us, that sounds a lot like SCP-701, The Hanged King's Tragedy, which revolves around a play that heralds the arrival of a mysterious entity that calls itself the Hanged King, a being with connections to the extra-dimensional realm of Alagada. The Hanged King entity in SCP-701 revels in decadence and chaos, so maybe it's better for it to be thrown into SCP-5555. Next, we have a corpse that's been altered with mechanical gears. That certainly sounds familiar too. SCP-217 is a virus that turns the body into a clockwork being, replacing organs and tissue with the appearance of gears and metal. Foundation researchers even noticed the similarity between the body and the appearance of a corpse fully transformed by SCP-217. But there's also the connection to Dr. Charles Gears, the famed researcher who acts as cold as ice, and frequently researches anomalies with connections to the Mechanite religion and the Church of the Broken God. It's been long rumored that Gears' body is also altered, taking on the appearance of clockwork. There's no telling what this connection means, but it's definitely something to think about. Next, in our retrospective, we have a white woman whose eyes were gouged out. While this doesn't exactly narrow anything down, the corpse's secondary anomalous properties certainly do. Photographs of the body show a pair of blue eyes that, when viewed through video, follow the camera. A girl and a camera? That sounds a lot like SCP-105, the photographer formerly known as Iris Thompson, who can manipulate the images in the photographs she takes on her camera. Iris is typically one of the friendlier, more approachable anomalies housed by the Foundation, and seeing her like this is heartbreaking. So if the corpses in the pit are former SCPs themselves, and existing objects are reincarnated and modified after being placed there, how many times has this happened over the years? Hidden files display text results involving numerous ultra-famous anomalies, including SCP-173, which reappeared in an art exhibit before it was contained again. But Foundation researchers were shocked to find that this time, the statue was made of concrete, giving it the appearance we all know today. Another test example involved SCP-049, the Plague Doctor, who was lured into the pit using a vial of liquid that he was convinced contained a vital component to his medical mission. SCP-049 reappeared in France, this time wearing the familiar Plague Doctor mask over his apparent previous attire, a gas mask. There had been mention of some sort of game being played by the Foundation administrator and the heads of various groups of interests, involving a number of anomalies and the killing and recreation of different SCPs, many turning into those that exist within the SCP archive. After Dr. Everett Mann's encounter with Dr. Holly Wondertainment, an email to Fritz from the head of the Global Occult Coalition congratulated the administrator for an exciting addition to the game in the form of Dr. Mann tracking the GOI's leaders. Some, such as the leader of the Church of the Broken God, contacted Fritz to express their displeasure at including the risk of being murdered by Mann. They claimed that introducing such a rogue element to the game after Fritz had already won felt like an indulgent victory lap. In addition, one reported that Holly Wondertainment had proclaimed dying to be unpleasant when she had woken up after Mann had seemingly killed her. In trying to uncover the truth about this sinister game, Mann had found himself an unwilling participant. It appeared that the administrator and the GOI leaders were immortal, and while they could be temporarily killed like Dr. Wondertainment, it wasn't exactly an enjoyable experience. Some GOI leaders even theorized that Fritz introduced man to their game as a way of eliminating them, or their organizations. However, man had no desire to kill any of them, apart from Fritz himself, the leader of the entire game. In his notes, man urges his 05-1 successor to share the SCP-5555 file with the other members of the 05 Council to spread awareness of the danger that Fritz, his various conspirators, and their game poses. Traveling to England, man attempted to obtain Fritz's location from Robert Bomero, High Priest of the Church of the Broken God. However, he found himself trapped by Bomero and Herman Fuller, head of another group of interest, the Anomalous Circus. Fuller knew that man had worked alongside Fritz for years and could prove useful for the next round of the game, while Bomero told him to simply kill Dr. Man, stating he wasn't worth dying again. However, Fritz appeared shortly after to take man into custody, threatening to kill his associates Bomero and Fuller if they didn't release man. While Bomero appeared more afraid of the dying process, Fuller refused to relent, resulting in an exchange of gunfire. Fritz dragged the injured man away, patched up his wounds, and left him in a safe house with clean clothes, bathroom facilities, and a note explaining what had happened. Fritz's note told man that he'd left him a plane ticket to Toronto, encouraging him to travel there and to take out the critic, head of Are We Cool Yet?, one of Fritz's fellow conspirators. The administrator also left another updated version of the SCP-5555 file, this time detailing not SCPs that had been replaced, but members of Foundation staff. It also stated that 05-2 to 05-13 were all dead at Fritz's hand, leaving only Dr. Man, 05-1, as Fritz felt like they'd bonded. Reassuring the other leaders that he wasn't acting against them, Fritz explained through emails that he had shaped man into the perfect element for their game. Man departed for Toronto, assaulting the critic in an effort to gain more information, while also simultaneously carrying out Fritz's wishes. Dr. Everett Mann, for his part, continued to carry out Fritz's dirty work, tracking the various GOI leaders and replaced Foundation staff, determined to topple Fritz and his game once and for all. Come the start of the new game, Fritz and all his associates had switched roles with each other. The administrator of the Foundation took on the role of Dr. Wondertainment. Dr. Wondertainment became the Prophet of Mechane, a representative of the Church of the Broken God. The role of the Global Occult Coalition's DC Al-Fiend became Jude Kairat, a member of the mischievous Gamers Against Weed group of interest. This new iteration of the game also assigned Dr. Man the role of Nobody. His win conditions for the game were to kill all the others, having himself been made one of them, an immortal by Fritz. Assembling his notes for the future 05 Council, Man set out on his hunt for Fritz, carrying with him a relentless grudge and signing off with a single item on a to-do list: kill Fritz. The story of SCP-5555 and the ongoing game that it relates to perhaps explains why we bury our dead. Sometimes uncovering them can reveal secrets that should never see the light of day. Some secrets, much like the dead, are best left buried. There's a quote that says, "The beautiful thing about learning is nobody can take it away from you. But what good is learning if the knowledge might hurt you, drive you mad, or even kill you? It just sits there in your mind, like a stick of dynamite with an invisible fuse. It could blow at any moment. All it takes is a careless slip of the tongue, and you might turn into a talking home appliance." This is a conundrum faced by anyone dealing with an Infohazard, a certain kind of anomaly often dealt with by the SCP Foundation. Before we get into some of the craziest examples of Infohazards and what they've done to people, because let's face it, that's what you're really here for. First, we have to answer that big question everyone's a little afraid to ask. Just what is an Infohazard? And how does it differ from a far more common type of SCP, the dreaded cognitohazard? Well, we're glad you're finally brave enough to ask. First, cognitohazards are anomalies that are dangerous to perceive through one of the senses. A well-known example is SCP-096, which is actually a visual cognitohazard. You see its face and you're toast. It's as simple as that. And cognitohazards exist for all of the other senses too: hearing, taste, touch, even smell. Infohazards, on the other hand, are different. These anomalous effects are triggered when you start trying to express or describe something about what you've perceived. And when you do, things start to get really weird, really fast. Maybe you're trying to explain what you just saw to family members, friends, or the police. Maybe you're a member of SCP Foundation staff trying to write up a report or a new experiment log. Or maybe you're a YouTube channel trying to create entertaining yet informative breakdowns and explanations of anomalies from the SCP Foundation. If any or all of these apply to you, then infohazards are going to be your worst enemy. But as we look at some of the strangest examples, we'll try our best to resist their effects. First, seeing as it's so hot out, how about we take a relaxing dip in the pool while we tell you all about SCP-1128. What is SCP-1128? Well, that's a loaded question. Technically speaking, it's a massive predatory aquatic creature, but despite its huge size, the creature can hunt its prey in any body of water. Whether you're stepping in a puddle, relaxing in the bath, or say chilling out in the pool, SCP-1128 can track you down and potentially eat you alive. In one particularly horrifying test, a D-Class was drinking from a simple glass of water when the aquatic predator emerged, yanked them inside, and ate them. Okay, so maybe you're feeling a little nervous now, but don't worry, you're still safe. Some people have even survived their attacks from SCP-1128. Well, their initial attacks anyway. The creature has a tendency to come back again and again, relentless in its ravenous hunger for human flesh. Whenever it attacks successfully, all that's left is some blood floating on the water. But again, please don't worry too much about this creature. We don't have another 682 on our hands. After all, it's an infohazard. It can only start hunting you if you receive a written or verbal description of the creature. Oh, or some kind of visual representation of the creature too. Actually, on second thought, you might want to get out of the pool now. And put down that drink too. Instead, let us tell you a nice little story. You step into a bar, smelling of fine liquor and rich mahogany. You even get a whiff of some fine leather-bound book. You see us sitting at the bar, motioning for you to come over, and you decide to approach. You're intrigued by our winning smile and our vast knowledge of anomalies and SCP Foundation lore. You take a seat next to us and order a drink. Get something fancy. It's on our tab after all. Our treat. What does this have to do with infohazards, you ask? That's the thing about SCP-1893, kid. We say, our dulcet tones smoother than scotch. You can never just talk about it. It's an infohazard that forces information about it to be delivered like a story. That's why we're in this bar right now. That's the setup. It expresses actual information about itself through the dialogue, see? You nod, beginning to grasp the concept as the bartender serves you your drink. It's been forever since you've been to a bar. Feels good to be out again, honestly. You drink deeply, savoring the flavor, but you almost choke when you see the man standing in the corner. He's so large and so distinctive. It surprises you that you hadn't noticed him before now. He stands in the corner, a freakishly tall and muscular guy, like a basketball player who decided to become a pro bodybuilder. His muscular arms are bulging out of his white vest, and a pair of bull's horns are tattooed across the top of his bald head, making him look like the devil made flesh. He stares at you with a subdued kind of annoyance, as if to say that you're not in real danger quite yet. But if he wanted, he could grab you and twist your head off like a bottle cap. What's with the huge guy, you ask us, more than a little concern in your voice? Oh, him? We reply with a smirk. He comes with the anomaly. He appears in every SCP-1893 experience to an extent, though his level of involvement varies. If SCP-1893 doesn't perceive you as an annoyance or a threat, then you're good to go. But if 1893 starts to feel like you're gonna cause it some problems, then the guy with the horn tattoos is gonna intervene. Speaking of which, you look up and you see that the giant man is now standing next to you, brow furrowed in visible rage. He picks up your drink and crushes the glass in his hand without flinching, dripping booze and blood onto the counter. He snarls,
I think you've had enough, buddy. Now it's time for you to leave, or we're gonna have to get physical. Capiche?
You don't need to be told twice. You grab your hat, get up, and leave the bar, abandoning us on our lonely stool. But our next Infohazard still awaits. You like poetry? Japanese poetry, yes? The humble haiku. It's Dear 931, a unique Infohazard. It's so poetic. Though specifically it takes the form of haiku. So what does that mean? A rigid structure. The first line 5 syllables, then 7, then 5. We can't talk about this in ways other than haiku. It is challenging. Object class is safe. It is kept at Site 19. Need 3rd tier clearance. So what is this thing? SCP-931. It is a rice bowl, white with a blue band and a cracked blue pattern, all inside the bowl. And we must confess, we took that one from the file. Man, haikus are hard. 3 inches in height, 4.5 inches across. Metric doesn't fit. No maker's marks found. Suspected to have been made late 1900s. Really makes you think on the skill of these poets. Sans Anomalies. Sure, it can't kill you, but writing these drives you mad. Curse 931. Trapped in this rhythm scheme makes the old man's torture world look like a resort. Okay, let's move on. Other SCPs to see. We're sick of haiku. Okay, back to normal. Time to shake off the structures of SCP-931 and talk about another iconic Infohazard, SCP-3007. This incurable Infohazard is a lot less whimsical than a rice bowl that forces you to write and speak in haiku. In fact, it's literally killed 7 people, and some in surprisingly gruesome ways. The main component of the Infohazard is known as SCP-3007-1. This is an extremely vivid, anomalous hallucination that affects those under the 3007 umbrella, known as SCP-3007-2. To be afflicted with SCP-3007 is a truly horrifying and debilitating condition. The hallucinations occur at an average of 4 times a day, with each episode lasting for as long as an hour. And during these episodes, the victims are at risk of grievous bodily harm, or even death. So the question now is, what exactly is the SCP-3007-1 hallucination? To the people experiencing it, they appear to be transported to a strange alien world consisting of a huge number of white towers or pillars stretching into the sky. SCP-3007-2 specimens are trapped on a series of bridges, incredibly far off the ground, that connect these various structures. This anomalous area is known as SCP-3007-3. It is important to remember that people transported to this world still remain, physically, in our own. However, any damage sustained with SCP-3007-3 will carry over into our own reality. To give one particularly gruesome example, some people fall from the precarious bridges and tumble to their deaths in SCP-3007-3. Back in our reality, they suddenly explode from the damage of an invisible high-speed impact, killing them instantly. There's much more to SCP-3007, enough that it probably warrants its own explanation, and the SCP Foundation takes it extremely seriously, believing that if the Infohazard is allowed to breach containment and become contagious, it could result in an XK-class end-of-the-world scenario. As a result, anyone found to be infected by SCP-3007 is contained and summarily terminated to reduce the risk of its spreading. To make things even worse, there are also concerns about SCP-3007-3 seeping into our reality, as those standing within a 2-meter range of SCP-3007-2 during a 3007-1 episode can actually hear the sounds from the terrifying hallucinatory reality. Okay, that was a little scary. How about instead of falling to your death without falling at all, we talk about a nice movie. Gonershrav by Martin Scorsese, one of the best gangster movies of all time. Wait, you've never heard of Gonershrav? It's got everything. Action, suspense, romance, a mountain of black thorns on which lives a dark tyrant of terrible and unknowable power. You sure you've never seen Gonershrav? Well, here's the thing. All signs point to movies like Gonershrav's and many others simply not existing. This comes as a result of SCP-2747, an infohazardous phenomenon that causes people to talk about works of fiction that don't exist. These works often feature commonalities, like an ethereal or disturbing tone, ambiguity, black thorns, and a sinister, mysterious antagonist. The Foundation is doing all they can to hunt down and suppress SCP-2747, but it's proving more difficult than they'd imagined. Currently, the leading hypothesis is that these tales may have actually existed once, but were erased from reality, leaving only the residue of memory and the odd scrap of evidence around. Many researchers speculate that the various pieces that form SCP-2747 are anafabula, pieces of fiction accidentally composed with the perfect elements to cause them to quite literally erase themselves over time. Now, the greatest concern that the Foundation has about these anafabulas is that they might actually be one, and their reality is on the precipice of collapse. But we really don't have time to unpack that right now. And like SCP-3007, a full explanation of this anomaly would take some time and is probably best tackled on its own. But there you have it, folks, Infohazards. They all say that knowing is half the battle, but in this case, it is the whole battle, and if you know, you lose. Not really a battle at all, come to think of it. More of a trap. But whether it's a vicious megafish, a strangely buff man with bull tattoos, a poetic rice bowl, or a nightmarish ordeal of daily hallucinations, there is no doubt that Infohazards are some of the most strange and fascinating anomalies that the Foundation has to offer. Oh, and of course, how could we forget the most well-known infohazard of all, SCP-2521. This entity is so infohazardous that its Foundation file entry is written in pictograms. This is because whenever information is recorded about this entity, it manifests and steals it. If you write it down, it'll take the paper. If you make a note of it on a computer, it'll take the computer. And of course, if you talk about it, it'll... Oh no, no, not again, no, 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 ah! Oh, that was a close one. But I'm okay. For now, at least. But don't worry about me. The Foundation regularly deals with anomalies of a more sinister nature. The most frightening among these, of course, are the ones that stalk and kill Foundation operatives. For no clear rhyme or reason, sometimes the Foundation's agents and researchers become subject to things that seek to entrap and utterly consume them. Dr. Elizabeth Graham is one such poor soul. Nowadays, her name is whispered through mess halls and cubicles, since no one really seems to know what happened to her. One moment she was carrying a stack of files between two offices, the next, completely gone. The Foundation's security teams couldn't figure out what happened to her. The CCTV cameras just showed her blinking out of existence and the files falling to the floor. Her biometric scanners simply returned a dead signal. It seemed that one day, Dr. Graham simply ceased to exist. Of course, the Foundation isn't above keeping secrets from its own personnel. Perhaps they did find something. A series of SCP documents, covered in sand, suddenly appearing in Graham's office one day, neatly stacked and paperclipped, all signed by her in her own handwriting, and detailing her days spent in a pocket reality of some sort. It wouldn't be the first time it had happened. The infamous Red Reality incident with Dr. Robert Scranton had already upset researchers, and there was no reason to alarm them further about something they couldn't change. So Dr. Graham's papers were covered up and relegated to long-term storage, where they would likely never be thought of again. But don't you wonder, what happened to Dr. Graham? The first thing Dr. Graham felt when she woke up was confusion. She didn't remember falling asleep. In fact, she didn't remember much at all. She had been moving files between two offices at Site 22 on a normal workday. She said hello to some of her coworkers and had a late lunch before returning to work. And then, nothing. The second thing she felt was fear. She looked around and realized she was in some kind of desert. A bright blue sky was overhead, and there seemed to be a sun, but all around her was sand. Massive sand dunes, flowing sand plains, and even what looked like a sandstorm in the distance. But all there was sand. Dr. Graham then noticed she was still holding some things. A small folder filled with paperclip documents. Pulling one out, she realized what it was. A template document for an SCP file, complete with sections for object class, containment procedures, and descriptions. This place was obviously not normal, but she had been anomalously transported to it. It needed to be documented. There was nothing else to do, so she sat down and began to write. She guessed at a number. Who knows what SCP the Foundation was on now? Might as well pick something for the middle. She scrawled SCP-3890 at the top and bubbled in Keter for the object class. The containment procedures were Spartan, but effective. No effective measures of containment were possible, and she would focus on simply exploring and finding out what was going on. Then came the description. No point in sticking to the Foundation's signature clinical tone, given the circumstances. It was more important to get the information down, and so she began to transcribe her thoughts. SCP-3890 is a potentially extra-dimensional or extraterrestrial space which I, Dr. Elizabeth Graham, was somehow transported to from Site-22 on 2/17/16. I'm uncertain as to whether I was transported here due to my involvement with the Foundation. After finishing the paragraph, she picked herself up off the sand dune she had landed on and started to walk in the direction of the sun. She didn't have much information, and exploring would be necessary if she was to accurately document the anomaly. It didn't take long before she came across something in the distance. An old, collapsed temple, completely ruined from the outside, the structure sagging in on itself. It had the columns and facades of a Roman building, she noticed. Peering inside, it was completely empty, except for more sand. In the distance, more ruins were present, some older, and some more modern office-looking buildings. In terms of geography, SCP-3890 takes the form of a seemingly infinite desert plain, with ruins of differing architectural design poking out through the sand. I've noted the presence of buildings of modern design, along with what appear to be ruins of ancient Roman and Eryxian structures. She only noticed the first figure when the sun started to set. As the sky shifted to twilight, she saw a person walking, casting a long shadow. Excitedly, she yelled out, to no response. When she approached, she saw a man in an older suit with completely lifeless eyes stumbling along. SCP-3890-1 is my collective designation for the humanoid entities that wander through SCP-3890. They do not respond to any stimuli, and as far as I've been able to tell, simply walk around without a specific destination. SCP-3890-1 are either entities that have been created to resemble humans but imperfect, or they are humans who have been mentally altered in some way to rob them of their faculties. There did seem to be some kind of a day-night cycle, and she didn't feel hungry or thirsty at all, though she did feel sleepy. After her first day in the desert, Dr. Graham settled in one of the collapsed ruins, drifting off to sleep. The second document opens much differently. This appears to be a document for something designated SCP-3890-2 Keter. The containment procedures are simply to always, constantly be on guard for it, whatever it is. If Dr. Graham feels something she is approaching is not as it appears, she is to immediately retreat. The description is a little clearer. SCP-3890-2 is a living entity of varying shape and size, which resides in SCP-3890. I am uncertain as to whether SCP-3890-2 originates here, or if it was transported here at some point in the same way I was. From what I have observed of its behavior, it appears to be some form of predator. SCP-3890-2 is currently hunting me. I first encountered the entity shortly after writing down my initial observations of SCP-3890. It snuck up behind me while I was resting and got me while I wasn't paying attention. I was knocked unconscious by its attack and woke up several hours later during the night. It had attacked me several times since that first encounter, with several hours between each attack. She was caught off guard by it last night. She hadn't noticed its presence. It seemed to just be another building in the far-off horizon when she sat down and pulled out her pencil and paper again. She had started to fill in some more information about the humanoids. They seemed to continuously walk in circles around some of the ruins, though it was unclear to her why, or even whether they were aware of what they were doing. But when she pulled her pencil out, she heard the buzzing in her head. It was like TV static, initially soft and low, but then ramping up and quickly becoming deafening, stifling her ability to think. She looked up, and she saw it. For a moment, it retained its form as the building in the horizon, but that quickly changed. It began to unfold on itself, completely black on the inside, like a dark paper crane continually folding and unfolding, stretching and compressing in on itself. By the time Dr. Graham got to her feet and ran away, she began to realize what it had done and quickly scrawled it onto the paper. SCP-3890-2 uses amnesticization as a form of attack. While it has not injured me physically thus far, I have lost all memory of significant chunks of my childhood and early adulthood. I can no longer recall which high school I went to or what my first job was. My current hypothesis is that, as an entity, it feeds upon memory. At first, Dr. Graham avoided buildings and stayed to the empty parts of the desert while walking. But when the creature appeared again, unfolding out of what seemed to be a piece of paper, it became clearer what it was: a mimic. In the coming hours, it would pretend to be a star, a human, a fly, even a patch of dirt, while trying to make Graham come closer enough to consume her mind. The next document opens in even more dire circumstances. The containment procedures have shifted drastically. Containment now focuses on making sure that the mimic does not consume any memories that Dr. Graham cannot afford to lose. She is to write down all vital memories so she can recall them if they do get destroyed, and watch for its presence in situations and at all times. She writes the document while huddled in a vault in a bank dropped into SCP-3890, since it offers a little security from the creature. But the corpses of a family in the bank imply something less hopeful. They chose to die by their own hand, rather than let the mimic get to them. Graham plans to kill anything that tries to enter the vault to ensure that the mimic doesn't get in, but has bigger problems. I have lost all memories regarding how I came to be employed by the Foundation. I know that I am a Foundation researcher with level 3 clearance, but I simply cannot recall how I came to be in this position. Many of the SCP objects I worked with are also missing from my memory. I can tell there is a hole there, but I just don't know what was there before. Her memories of her own identity have been obliterated. Who she is, where she's from, what the Foundation even is, they have all been taken by the mimic. Without fail, it manages to surprise her and consume an important memory, then dashing away as she tries to figure out what got stolen from her. Something small, like her favorite food or her childhood bedroom, or something foundational and fundamental, like her name and her sense of self. And avoiding it isn't an option. It can pretend to be any of the single grains of sand in the boundless desert, and Graham came to the conclusion this is an infinite dimension of sand, serving as a hunting grounds for the mimic. Of course, it could be anything else too. A brick, a window, any of the buildings, any of the mindless wandering people, or the clothes on Dr. Graham's back. Any of them could be the mimic, and Graham thought of that too. It's why she hasn't let go of her knife in days, even though it's dripping blood from examining the corpses of the former victims of SCP-3890-2. Even though she doesn't need to eat or drink, there is another concern: sleep. The moment she falls asleep, the mimic will no doubt be upon her. She hastily scribbled down a little bit more onto the paper before trying to rest. The sun's going down. I can't allow myself to fall asleep. 3890-2 will come in without a doubt if I do. I don't have to eat, I don't have to drink, but I still have to sleep. This place is designed for the mimic's benefit. It can hunt its prey to its heart's content without them dying of thirst and starvation. Is this an enclosure maybe? Some kind of sick game? My name is Elizabeth Graham. I can't forget that now. This page is my memory. The next word she writes on that paper shows something ominous. She can hear crying outside of her makeshift shelter. The next document, things have changed. Someone named Tony is mentioned in the containment procedures. Someone Graham trusts to take watch while she sleeps and watches for the mimic. The descriptions explain. Tony is a child, only 10 years old, who fell into this dimension, the same as Graham. When walking home from the playground, the mimic can imitate objects, but it can't speak. The boy is real. They've worked on a rudimentary password system to confirm each other's identities regardless. Graham feels almost hopeful. Their chances of survival have doubled, even though they're being hunted, not for their lives, but for the precious memories inside their heads. But she's still worried about other things. If people don't starve or thirst to death in SCP-3890, do they age? How long have the mindless humanoids been wandering around? How long has she been wandering around? Though she reminds herself of her training, she also faces the fact that she might have been exclusively picked for a past reason. I have this memory from my childhood still. Everything around it is gone, but it's sort of floating free, devoid of context. I'm visiting a woman in a hospital. I think it's a hospital, and I think it's a woman I know, a close relative, my mother or my grandmother, I think. And I go to visit her. I'm just a kid, 12, I think, and she doesn't know who I am at all. I don't remember what happened before that or after. Perhaps the mimic brought her here because it knew she would hate having her mind consumed like this. But that would mean it wasn't just intelligent, that it was sadistic and cruel. She noted down she'd ask Tony if he had a similar experience, and they'd be a little closer to working it out. The document is hopeful. Dr. Graham now has something to believe in. The next document is a complete mess. Scribblings and scrawlings in the margins, and the text doesn't even begin to make any kind of sense. It's all word salad, the ravings of someone gone utterly insane. She mentions herself, her own name repeatedly and constantly, but in between are mentions of Tony, the Foundation, the Mimic, and everything in between. Dr. Graham has lost her grip on reality. That or whatever wrote this wasn't Dr. Elizabeth Graham. The document after that has a very simple containment procedures. She is to kill SCP-3890-2, the Mimic. Description: I woke up this morning. Tony was gone. He was the Mimic. It was smarter than I thought, I guess. I was stupid. I should have seen this coming, but I was desperate and it knew it. All it left was some scrawled document and a hole in my head the shape of my name. The Mimic, disguising itself as a child, had stolen the last thing she had left, her name. All of Graham's precautions were useless. Even though her name was written down a dozen times in the last documentation, she cannot remember it. In fact, when she reads it, it immediately removes itself from her mind again. Not only has it taken her memory, it has taken her ability to reform them. And the document it left behind is one of her own, an SCP template. Though, of course, she doesn't know what the Foundation is anymore. The same document we have seen previously in the pile. Yes, the Mimic is learning to imitate Graham and getting better at it. Maybe that's why she hasn't been killed yet. It's yet to pin down her thought process and is waiting until it has her perfectly memorized. Not that she would know, given that she's forgotten how she even came here, or when. But the Mimic made a mistake. It took everything from her, even her hope, which has left Dr. Elizabeth Graham a woman with nothing left to lose. She resolves she will not get out of SCP-3890. The documents will probably wind back up in Foundation possession from some testing with an unrelated anomaly, but she will be a mindless husk, or worse. She plans to kill the Mimic. It's a cowardly, fearful stalker creature, and only hunts by pretending to be other things. She knows she can take it in a fight, and she still has her knife. The next document is sober. The object class, neutralized. Dr. Graham walked boundlessly through the desert until the Mimic jumped for her. It unfolded from a cloud, turning into a mass of black origami and lunging for her. It didn't expect her to turn around and slash outward with her knife, piercing its strange black flesh. It let out a scream, shrank, and Dr. Graham realized that it could feel pain. So when it lunged again, she drove her knife deeper into it before pulling back. And she repeated the process until it was a tiny black mite in the sand, and then she crushed it under her heel. It was that easy, that simple. But of course, every time it had come close to her, it had taken another bite out of her mind, just as she took another slash at its form. We opened each other up. I filled its body with holes, and it filled my mind with them. There's not much left of me. She curses herself from not having done it earlier, but maybe there was a reason. She can't remember it anymore. In any case, the Mimic's dying bites from her were particularly damaging, the straw that broke the camel's back. What's left of Dr. Elizabeth Graham is falling apart. She scribbles things down onto the paper, while her mind realizes that she can't even understand what she's writing anymore. The next document is empty. Not every story with the Foundation's agents fighting a monster has a happy ending. Everybody remembered where they were, what they had been doing, when the SCP Foundation revealed themselves to the world. It was an event that had so fundamentally changed the lives of every person on Earth that it became pretty hard to forget that momentous, horrible day, even though for most people, it had begun as a day like most others. Dane Moss had been at home when it started. His roommates were talking about buying an air hockey table for their place, something to liven up their Saturday nights. Even as he half listened to them discussing it, Dane figured it would never happen. He was right, of course, but he never could have anticipated the thing that stopped it. All of them had stopped and fallen silent as the news report came through. A group calling themselves the SCP Foundation, previously responsible for the containment of anomalous objects, entities, and phenomena, had declared its new intention to exterminate the entire human race. Dane's split-second belief that the broadcast was a Cloverfield-style viral marketing stunt for a new movie was quickly disproved when the ground started to shake. Unbeknownst to him, the Foundation was not only real, but had detonated nuclear charges along the back of SCP-169, an enormous ancient arthropod that's body had made up an archipelago adrift in the ocean. The detonation caused the Leviathan to stir, resulting in massive earthquakes and tsunamis. Dane was the only one to make it out of the apartment alive. Elsewhere, Joe Reese had been grabbing a coffee on his way home from work. He briefly overheard the news report but barely paid it any mind. Then, waiting for his flat white, wondering what the holdup was, he caught a part of a conversation between two people behind him.
What is that thing?
One asked.
I don't know, but its face is pure nightmare fuel.
The other replied.
A bunch of pictures of it just appeared on everyone's socials. It's really freaky stuff.
A sudden shriek went out from a number of the coffee shop patrons. Joe noticed a towering humanoid shadow being cast by something behind him. Its arms were stretched out disproportionately long, and it was attacking the two people behind him. Acting on an instantaneous fight-or-flight response, Joe ran, without looking back to see SCP-096 slaughtering everyone that had seen its face. Around the same time as the Foundation's ominous announcement was played over every news channel on the planet, Renee Hudson and Sky Soto had been on a date. The pair of them had been enjoying hanging out, playing a few mildly competitive games at the bowling alley, but there was still something unspoken lingering in the air. Neither Sky nor Renee really felt any connection. They liked each other's company, but that was as far as it went. Although neither one of them knew how to broach the subject for fear of hurting the other's feelings, and in the same vein, neither of them could have predicted the commotion that would happen next. The noise came from outside, the deafening screams followed by a flood of people running for their lives. Hundreds, if not thousands, were fleeing, any that fell over in the street being trampled underfoot by everyone behind them. Human beings moved like a mass of ants clambering over each other to get away from a gigantic, ferocious lizard. Despite the news broadcast declaring themselves and their intentions to wipe out all of humanity, nobody on the ground would ever be able to comprehend just why the Foundation unleashed SCP-682 and allowed the hard-to-destroy reptile to slaughter innocent civilians in droves. While they didn't know it, or may not have agreed, Sky, Renee, Dane, and Joe were all lucky to have survived the initial anomalous onslaught unleashed by a rogue SCP Foundation. It did little to ease the pain of being displaced from their homes, forced to migrate across the country to join camps of other survivors, made refugees by anomaly attacks, and the efforts of apathetic agents of the Foundation. And of the four of them, not one could have predicted the shared fate that awaited them. During the months in the wake of the Foundation's opening assault on mankind, Renee and Sky had mostly stuck together. They had moved further and further south, managing to stay safe. Neither one had thought about their awkward date in months. They were just grateful to have someone they knew to stick together with. Meanwhile, Joe and Dane were hopping from one refugee camp to the next much in the same way, moving north and eastward, respectively. After deploying their first wave of anomalies, the SCP Foundation's efforts had shifted to primarily focusing on groups of interest that could pose a threat to their plans. While organizations with knowledge of the anomalous, like the Global Occult Coalition, were among the first in their crosshairs, the civilian population was left living in fear, but unscathed. That is, until the Foundation began targeting the refugee camps. One of their tactics was to unleash SCP-2241, a 7-year-old boy with reality-warping powers, into survivor communities to act as a living weapon, destroying the larger refugee camps. It was the increased frequency and ruthlessness of the Foundation's attacks on human survivors that forced Sky, Renee, Dane, and Joe to unknowingly converge on each other. camps for survivors started getting smaller, consisting of only a handful of people, in the hopes that this would make it easier for them to avoid detection by the Foundation. Arriving and hopping off the back of a jeep with only the clothes on their backs, the 4 strangers exchanged uncertain glances. They had been brought to an abandoned dock, the wreckage of an overturned cargo ship laying on its side in the harbor. Shipping containers were scattered all around, looking as if they had spilled out of the boat and onto the dock. The driver of the jeep hadn't told them where to go from there. Instead, he had just driven off without so much as a word. The 4 of them looked around. Dane seemed particularly unnerved at being so close to the water, despite it having been months since the Leviathan settled back to sleep. Suddenly, one of the shipping containers burst open, and a broad flannel shirt-wearing man stepped out. His face was buried beneath a thick beard, a shotgun resting against his shoulder as he approached the group. The man's stern, stony expression quickly changed into a wide grin as he jovially and unexpectedly pulled Dane into a hug.
Welcome, my friends!
The man roared with laughter.
Oh, welcome!
Who are you? Sky asked.
Of course, allow me to introduce myself.
He responded, letting go of Dane, who needed to catch his breath after being squeezed so much.
My name is Jovianus. For safety, I watch over this camp,
the man announced. Camp? Joe asked, looking at the wreckage.
The Foundation has been getting more zealous with targeting those of us that are left,
Jovianus explained, gesturing for the 4 to follow him as he walked back towards the container.
So we had to take a less conspicuous approach to surviving, splitting the camps up into fewer people, dispersing everyone around a bit more, and of course,
he swung open the door to the metal container. Inside the cramped space, there were 2 bunks either side, one above the other, making 4 in total, along with a sleeping bag on the floor.
Staying in places the Foundation wouldn't think to look,
Jovianus continued. We have to sleep in here? Renee asked in disbelief.
Better for avoiding detection,
the camp's protector replied.
Otherwise, the next camp along is only 20 minutes away on foot, over in a warehouse, if you'd rather go there, but be warned, they have rats.
Although it came with a brief adjustment period, the group quickly acclimatized to living in the abandoned dock. Each of them came to appreciate Jovianus's efforts to keep them all fed with what few rations they had. The 4 of them started calling him Big Joe, referring to Joe as Lil Joe to avoid confusion. Of the group, Dane seemed to have the hardest time adapting. He was something of a conspiracy theorist, anxiously talking about the other great disasters throughout human history and wondering if the Foundation had been responsible for them all. Sky felt a little sorry for him, so they decided to humor his theory that the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in Pompeii was also the SCP Foundation's doing, despite occurring all the way back in 79 AD. Through all their various concerns about surviving in this anomalous apocalyptic world, Big Joe seemed to have a talent for keeping the group's spirits up. Whether it was by recounting them all with folk stories or turning bland food rations into more flavorful meals, he made the 4 of them feel safe, especially with his weapon never far away. That is, until one evening. A glowing red streak shot through the air not far from camp, catching Jovianus's immediate attention. It was an emergency flare, set up by the neighboring camp at the warehouse. Something was wrong. Grabbing his shotgun and urging Sky, Dane, Renee, and Lil Joe to stay put, Big Joe left, running off into the growing dark of the night to try to help. The whole group stayed awake, waiting for their protector to return, the next hour feeling like an eternity. By the time he returned, the sun had fully set outside. Even by the low light of their lamps inside the container, it was clear by his face that any and all optimism had drained out of Jovianus.
There was nothing left of all. There was nothing left. All of them were gone,
he explained, unable to believe what he had seen.
There was this oil everywhere, corrosive like an acid, just burning through what was left of them.
Trying to regain some semblance of composure, he urged the group to get some sleep, reassuring them that they would be safe for the rest of the night. Not one of them realized just how wrong they were, or that they'd never seen Jovianus again after they fell asleep. Renee was the first to discover he had gone missing, screaming with panic, waking up Sky and the 2 boys. After they had calmed down, Sky tried to rationalize what was going on. They were worried about Big Joe and the others, but he couldn't afford to lose their nerve and potentially attract the attention of a Foundation kill squad.
It's the Foundation,
Dane babbled, terrified.
They found us. They're closing in. Oh, man.
Relax,
Sky replied. All of you chill. There are other camps nearby. Maybe Big Joe went to check on them too. See if what had happened to the warehouse group happened anywhere else. You don't think he would have told us? Lil Joe retorted, seeming to be the least concerned about Jovianus' whereabouts. We were asleep. It's not like him to wake us up. He knows we'd worry. Sky answered. Well, what if he's dead? Renee sobbed. Don't say that, they replied. She's right, though. He left his shotgun right here. Joe interjected again. Whatever got the warehouse group killed him. It's obvious. At least I don't have to go by that stupid nickname anymore. What the hell, man? Dane yelled. You're joking at a time like this? What's wrong with you? There was an uncomfortably long pause. Everyone in the container turned to look at Joe, leaning against one of the metal walls with his arms folded. The other three were all thinking the same thing, although Dane was the first to say it aloud. You killed him, didn't you? Don't be ridiculous! Joe chastised him, backing away slightly, betraying his own little hint of fear. You and Renee are hysterical. You both need to calm down. Before Joe could finish his sentence, a withered arm reached out of the wall and grabbed his throat. It looked like the rotting, decaying arm of a corpse, protruding out of a puddle of black mucus that now seemed to be spreading across the inner wall of the container. Renee screamed in horror as more of the black substance oozed from the arm, melting away Joe as it held him helplessly in its grip. It was then that a face peered through the oily patch smeared on the wall, the nightmarish visage of SCP-106, the Old Man. For a second, Sky thought about trying to help Joe. They could have pulled him free, but it was already too late. The corrosion was spreading. It looked like it would melt them too if they so much as touched it. Joe was gone. The remaining three of them burst out of the shipping container they had called home, afraid for their lives. What the hell was that? Dane screamed. Oh man, I knew it. They've sent a monster after us. Sky barely paid him any mind, their attention grabbed by movement nearby. Someone had started running the second they had exited the shipping crate. They had been watching from a distance. Hey, stop! Sky yelled, about to run after them. Sky? Renee's voice was cracking under the weight of her terror. Turning around, they saw it. The old man stood behind Renee. It looked even more grotesque under the low light provided by several distant fires in the ruins of cities the Foundation had destroyed, giving the horizon a hellish glow. SCP-106's withered, lipless face bore his rotting teeth, locked in a skull-like grin. It gave a sense he was gaining some twisted enjoyment out of what he did next. Renee had been frozen to the spot, sniffling in fear, her legs rigid and locked in place, until the old man clamped a hand over her shoulder. Then she cried out in a blood-curdling shriek of agony. More of the black ooze spilled from his emaciated fingers, dripping down her front while Sky looked on in terror. Renee had been the one person who had been with them the entire time, from the moment the Foundation unleashed hell. Every camp they moved to, Renee was in the same one with them. The pair of them may have not been a couple, but she had been the only constant in this anomalous apocalypse. And now, this sinister SCP was killing her. Fighting every urge to grab Renee and pull her free, Sky instead let themselves be led away by Dane. Choking back tears, they ran alongside him in the direction of whoever had been watching them. The shadowy figure was just about visible, although definitely still close enough to be heard. In the dark, there was the sound of a fall, accompanied by a pained grunt, indicating that whoever had been watching the container had tripped. Both Dane and Sky knew that this was their chance. Together they lunged at the figure before he had a chance to scramble back to his feet, with Dane pinning the observer down by his wrists. That was when the light of the burning city on the horizon illuminated his face. He was the jeep driver, the one who had dropped them at Jovianus' camp to begin with, the only other person, apart from Big Joe, who knew where their camp was. You! Sky declared. What were you doing spying on us? I have nothing to say to you, the man spat. Answer their question, Dane yelled, slapping the man in the face, although he didn't seem to react. What is this thing chasing us? Why did it kill our friends? You might as well tell us, Sky told him calmly. After all, once that monster catches up, we'll all be dead. You were watching, expecting a result, right? Had to make sure none of us made it. Not that there's anyone left for us to tell if we did survive. He's with the Foundation, Dane gasped, catching on quickly. You had them send that corpse thing to kill us, man! SCP-106, the undercover MTF agent corrected. And yeah, it's here because we sent it. You all went underground hiding in your little camps. We had to look even closer to find you all. Ungrateful, all of you. Ungrateful! Sky exploded, enraged and offended at the idea anyone could justify all the death the Foundation had unleashed on the world. What, you expect us to thank you for hunting your fellow human beings to extinction? Dropping nightmare after nightmare on us, and we're meant to be grateful for that? None of you understand what we're trying to do, the Foundation agent replied without a hint of remorse. What we're trying to do is bigger, more important than your mundane little lives. The only way we can save humanity from it is by wiping you out. Before either Sky or Dane could ask what it was, a gloopy, oily smear appeared on the ground. Clawing his way out of it, the old man reached for the MTF operative, disintegrating him like he had done before. But the agent barely reacted, didn't cry out like Renee or Joe had. He was still, even as he was being melted by the slimy black secretion of SCP-106. It was as if the man couldn't feel the pain of what was happening to him as he died. A splatter of the same corrosive mucus spread onto Dane's sleeve. Freaking out as it began burning through his jacket, he desperately tried to wipe it off, only to smear it, spreading the dissolving substance further and crying out as he felt it eating into the palms of his hands. SCP-106 climbed out of its oily puddle, dropping the disintegrating MTF agent. He disappeared into the corrosive pool, vanishing from sight like he'd fallen into a ditch. Sky backed away, their eyes locked with the sunken stare of the old man, feeling their legs begin to freeze in fear just like Renee's. Gun! Dane rasped, laying at SCP-106's feet, slowly succumbing to the same fate that had befallen the others. Big Joe's gun! He rasped again. With the last of his strength, he used his arm to grab the old man's ankle, howling in pain as more of the black substance oozed from the monster's wrinkled flesh. Sky turned and raced back towards the shipping container, hardly daring to look over their shoulder. Every movement, every tiny shift of shadow they detected in the corner of their eye filled their mind with the images of the old man bearing down on them, wearing that sadistic, skeletal grin. Sky pulled the heavy metal door open, using all their strength to get back inside. Their arms were numbed, trembling so much with terror that it was like they weren't attached properly. They fumbled about in the dark, their fingers brushing up against the weapon, resting in the corner where Jovianus had left it. Pulling on the pump, Sky turned, the gun raised, knowing that the old man was right behind them, and pulled the trigger. It gave a redundant click. It was empty, no ammunition. The gun had been just for show. SCP-106 reached for the weapon and pulled it from Sky's hands, the metal of it slowly melting as it was coated in the tar-like corrosive substance. Recoiling their hands from it, Sky went to dash for the door, only to feel the old man's bony, burning fingers hook into their back and drag them towards the greasy black stain he was leaning out of, pulling them into his domain. This world had been a living nightmare since the Foundation had revealed itself and unleashed an anomalous apocalypse upon humanity. But SCP-106's pocket dimension might just have been worse. Agent Carla Mendoza was one of the best field agents that Site-41 had ever seen. She was professional, cool under pressure, and when the situation demanded it, she could be a straight-up badass. During a Chaos Insurgency raid on the site, she'd single-handedly killed 4 different insurgents, the last one with her bare hands. During containment breaches, she'd always be the first one charging into the fray, her Foundation standard issue Beretta drawn and ready to fire. Agent Mendoza was so devoted to the job that she took up the site director's offer to start living on site, so she could always be there to help if an emergency situation unfolded. After all, when it all hits the fan, you want someone as utterly unshakable as Agent Mendoza on your side. The job had thrown the worst of the worst at her and she'd never even flinched. So surely nothing could scare Agent Mendoza, right? After a long day of kicking ass, taking names, and filling in the properly mandated amount of SCP Foundation debriefing paperwork, Agent Mendoza retired to her Site-41 quarters. She felt exhausted and sweaty, so before heading to bed to watch some wonderful SCP Explained videos on her phone, how kind, she decided to take a quick shower. The last thing she expected was for this particular shower to become, well, let's say, Hitchcockian. The water was running hot and clean, filling the air with steam. Agent Mendoza was lathering up her hair when she first heard the noise. Heavy, wheezing breaths coming from just behind the shower curtain. The second she heard it,
Agent Mendoza felt a kind of brutal, crushing anxiety that she'd never experienced before, like a hand was reaching into her chest and squeezing her heart. The self-defense training that had been encoded into her muscle memory over years of working at the Foundation kicked into effect. In a blind panic, she struck out at the shower curtain, causing it to sway outwards and land directly on the face of Mendoza's wheezing voyeur. Who or whatever it was standing right there, less than a meter away from the shower. The wheezing carved into Mendoza's ears like a butcher's knife. What an awful, monstrous sound. And despite the fact that the shower curtain obscured its face, she could still somehow see it. The way a defenseless animal can sense an approaching predator without ever locking eyes on it, and just somehow know that it's too late for them to escape now. Every training session, every achievement, every piece of battle-hardening experience, it all evaporated in the presence of that thing. Mendoza was so terrified she might as well have been a child. The monster just stood there beyond the curtain, its raw, fleshy face parted into a freakishly wide, yellow-toothed grin. She didn't know how, but on some deep primal level, she was aware that if this thing got its hands on her, something horrific beyond description would happen to her. She was too terrified to even move a muscle in its presence. She remained like that, standing in the shower and sobbing quietly for the next 3 solid hours, until the creature finally disappeared. When her colleagues found her, she'd experienced moderate scalding wounds from the hot water of the shower. It took several hours for Agent Mendoza to compose herself enough to share her story. A couple days later, Tim Ellis, a junior-level filing clerk, was found trapped in a Site-41 supply closet. He'd urinated in his Foundation-issued slacks and was in a state of borderline catatonia. When his superiors asked him why he'd been spending 2 hours in a supply closet on company time, he reported that it was because a monster had appeared outside the door when he was searching for a replacement stapler. Despite never actually opening the door to see what was outside or call for help, Mr. Ellis said that he felt as though he would have had a heart attack if he actually opened that accursed door. He was able to provide a clear description of the monster. He said it was tall and emaciated, with reddish-brown skin that made it seem almost burnt or rotten. While it stood there and waited beyond the supply closet door, it let out the most awful wheezing noise, like an old rusty iron lung. But the image that Ellis seemed most fixated on was the monster's face, or lack thereof. Just a huge grinning mouth that covered up its entire head, stocked with an arsenal of massive yellow teeth. Ellis was visibly shivering as he talked about it. 2 incidents are an unpleasant coincidence, but 3 are a bona fide pattern, and it didn't take long for more sightings of this strange new anomaly, dubbed SCP-303 or the Doorman, to pop up across the site. It earned that name by always appearing behind some kind of doorway, or at least a movable divider, in the case of Agent Mendoza's shower curtain. Whenever it appeared outside a doorway, nearby Foundation personnel would report being struck with a sudden paralyzing terror that made engaging with the creature impossible. Attempts to call for help were also often stifled, as the very presence of the Doorman causes disruptions to electrical equipment. Whenever the Doorman manifests in your proximity, it's safe to say that it'll be commanding your absolute undivided attention. This was a particularly frightening case for the SCP Foundation, because it was one of the few anomalies bringing the fight directly to them. Most sentient anomalous beings would do anything to avoid getting captured by the SCP Foundation and contained in one of their high-security sites, full of experienced researchers and state-of-the-art equipment designed specifically to neutralize their effects. The Doorman, however, just seemed to take this as a challenge, turning even the most hardcore personnel on the site into gibbering wrecks with its mere presence. But the Doorman was just getting started. Agent Henderson had a frightening encounter in the break room. He was pulling a long shift and just wanted to grab some coffee creamer from the cabinet. However, as he approached the cabinet, he heard the telltale wheezing and that terrible, overwhelming terror set in once more. The Doorman was sitting inside the cabinet in a fetal position. He just knew it. Could this thing really appear just anywhere as it pleased, and keep people in or out until it decided to dematerialize and torment somebody else? When the creature finally dematerialized and the cabinet was examined, the coffee creamer was found to be missing, leaving Agent Henderson distraught. This was the first recorded instance of the Doorman stealing a physical item, but it would be far from the last. Henderson wondered whether the creature that had just humiliated him was sitting somewhere else now, sipping from a warm cup of joe, with its big, freakish mouth and laughing at him. But a few incidents after this, things would become considerably more serious. The Doorman was about to take its first life. Well, it isn't really that simple, if you want to get into the semantics of the thing. When the body of Dr. Barker was found inside the second-floor storage room after a spree of SCP-303 incidents, the question was naturally posed as to whether the Doorman had gotten more dangerous and finally directly attacked one of its victims. Not quite. There had only been one way in and out of the storage room, a secured decompression chamber, and the Doorman had appeared inside this chamber while Dr. Barker was in the storage room, effectively trapping him inside with the sheer terror it causes in its victims. He was trapped in the room for a grand total of 5 days, at which point he finally died of dehydration, and the Doorman demanifested shortly afterward. The staff of Site-41 scaled up their countermeasure efforts, hoping to discover more about and perhaps even trap and contain the infamous Doorman. Dr. Burroughs, Researcher Matthews, 4 members of security personnel, and 4 D-Class operatives formed a kind of strike team, ready for quick dispatches whenever the Doorman happened to manifest. It wasn't long before the creature appeared in a room on the first floor, but the team quickly intercepted its location, ready and eager to gather more data on the mysterious being that had been terrorizing them all for weeks. Dr. Burroughs ordered one of the D-Classes to open the door and look inside, but the D-Class refused out of fear. The doctor told him that if he didn't open the door, he'd be transferred to SCP-682 duty. The D-Class frantically shook his head and said, "I'd rather take my chances with the reptile than go in there." The doctor was getting frustrated. He told the D-Class that if he didn't open the door immediately, he'd be terminated right there on the spot. The D-Class still refused, saying that he'd take death over what the Doorman would do to him if he stepped inside. Without hesitation, Dr. Burroughs ordered one of the security officers to shoot the D-Class then and there. The shot was fired. The D-Class was terminated. Dr. Burroughs then ordered a female D-Class who just witnessed this callous execution to open the door, or the same abrupt death would befall her. She still refused, then began to describe the awful things she believed the Doorman would do to her if she went inside. Researcher Matthews was visibly shaken by the description. Dr. Burroughs decided not to terminate this D-Class immediately. He instead wanted to see just how much pressure the Doorman's anomalous fear-based resistance mechanisms could take. Another D-Class was given a combat knife, and also given the order to cut the female D-Class with it every time she refused and ordered to go inside. After 2 hours of repeated asking from Dr. Burroughs, the female D-Class dropped dead from blood loss. At no point did she ever attempt to open the door. It seemed that in all the cases for those in the thrall of the Doorman's anomalous effects, death is a truly preferable alternative to ever facing it head-on. It's worth mentioning that these tests were conducted back in the 1970s, before the formation of the Foundation's Ethics Committee, which explains why their methods feel a little needlessly cruel. Since then, the Doorman has fully commandeered the second-floor storage room, the same one where it caused Dr. Barker's death. It only leaves the room to steal more items from around the site. These items have included a cryotube, 3 sets of standard Foundation surgical equipment, 2 D-Class research cadavers, 1 gasoline-powered generator, a variety of chemicals from the chemical storage areas, and, of course, poor Agent Henderson's can of powdered coffee creamer. The reason for the Doorman taking an interest in these particular items remains unknown, but we can only assume that nothing good can come of it. And there you have it, folks, the strange, frightening, and eerily inconclusive tale of the Doorman. All we can really say is that we're awfully glad he's fixated on bothering Site-41, because who knows what would happen if he widened his net to the rest of us. Thankfully, we won't need to think about that. Oh, that's odd. Can you hear that? I thought I was imagining it. Though come to think of it, I can't help but feel a little uneasy right now. Do you ever get that feeling that you're being watched? Wait, the door. There's something behind the door. Can you feel it?
Can you feel its red flesh and rotten teeth pressing up against it, breathing, waiting? Can you feel it staring at you without eyes, looking deep into your very soul?
Well, that's good. But just stay cautious, okay? After all, life has many doors, Ed boy, and you never know who or what will be waiting for you behind the next one. Picture this. If you'll excuse that foreshadowing pun, you're at your local city mall in Ohio, a place that's never still. Every time you go there, no matter what time of day or day of the week, it's always full of people, all bustling about, shopping, eating, dashing past one another. Maybe, presumably like everyone else, you came in to get some specific item, or you might just be browsing. Heck, you could be there for a casual date, or to grab a bite to eat at the food court. That's when you remember you need to have your picture taken. It could be that your passport is about to expire, or your driver's license hasn't been updated since you moved. Whatever the reason, lucky for you, there's a photo booth right here in the mall. Take your own photo, boasts the sign on the outside of the cramped cubicle. A list of instructions below describing just how quick and easy the process is. You take a look at the price list, feed the right amount of money into the slot, and take a seat inside. Pulling the curtain closed, you straighten your back, look directly into the lens. A short countdown appears on the screen. 3, 2, 1. A flash bursts from the bulb above the lens, filling the booth, and leaving those white spots floating in your vision for a few moments. You head back out of the cubicle, waiting to pick up the glossy paper with your photos on it as it starts rapidly printing them off. You wanted a 2x2, 4 total pictures of your face. But then, as it finishes printing and you inspect the pictures, turning the paper in your hands, you're met with a surprise, an unnerving one to say the least. The pictures don't show your face. In fact, it barely looks like a human face at all. It has your clothes and your hair, but the whole image has been warped. Not just out of focus, but completely disproportional. Annoyed that you spent your money only to receive a highly distorted image, you wander off to find another booth, throwing the unusable picture in the nearest trash can. Now, sure, you might write off something like that as just an odd occurrence, a freak of technology caused by faulty machinery in desperate need of repair. But what you don't know, in fact you won't even realize until it's too late, is what really just happened. When you sat down and that flash went off, taking your picture and printing it off as a warped, unrecognizable mess, something was born. Located at the end of a series of long, winding concrete stairs and kept out of sight behind doors marked "Keep Out" and "Staff Only," is a lower level of the mall. Hidden in this dark, off-limits area that no member of the public is permitted to access, there is a service store, somewhere in the southwest corner of the 3rd sub-basement. Just taking a look at it, you could easily imagine nothing at all interesting behind it, like a power generator or a storage room. But if you were to push it open and venture inside, you'd stumble upon something you would never have expected in your wildest dreams, or more accurately, your most disturbing nightmares. Beyond that service door is a cavern, hardly the first thing you'd assume to be secreted away underneath a city shopping mall. Although if you're into cave jumping, it would be ill-advised to take a spelunking adventure down there. The entire cavern isn't actually part of our world. It's an extra-dimensional space. Think of it as its own little pocket universe that has somehow become connected to ours and can now be accessed through this doorway. If it helps, you can even picture our universe as a big soap bubble, with a slightly smaller bubble attached to it. In actuality, it's infinitely more complicated and looks nothing like 2 bubbles of different sizes, but like we said, if it helps to picture it that way, then go right ahead. If you were brave enough, or naive enough, to venture deeper into this cave and not to be put off by its walls that look like they've been carved from pure limestone, then you would have had to watch your step to avoid a nasty fall. Within the large cave space is a deep, dark pit, a rocky conduit in the ground, seemingly leading down into the earth. But taking a closer look, the walls of this pit aren't made of rock. They don't even match the limestone that the rest of the cavernous room looks to be cut from. The surface of the pit is coated in a slimy substance, closer to something biological, coming from a living thing rather than being carved out of rock. Depending on your familiarity with the texture,
You might even say this substance is not all that far off from the appearance and feel of human fat tissue. Although you probably shouldn't reach in to try and touch it for yourself, least of all because the walls of the pit are constantly secreting a corrosive substance like acid that could easily break down your body by its molecules, painfully burning you until you melted down into soup. But there's something else down there. Lots of somethings, as a matter of fact. And the moment you took that photo, sitting in the safety of the booth in the mall above, a new something found itself born into the pit. It looks almost exactly like you, but its face is all wrong. You could even say distorted, like a photograph that didn't quite come out right. The abnormalities in its face could take the form of lacerations, cuts and open wounds, or bloody welts, like looking in a mirror at a twisted, injured version of yourself. Or this imperfect copy might have growths bulging out from its head, covering its facial features to make it virtually unrecognizable as a clone of you. Then again, maybe it'll just come out missing everything. No eyes, mouth, nose, just a blank, expressionless mask on a body otherwise identical to yours. And what does this thing, this clone, do now that it finds itself in a pit filled with other writhing, imperfect copies of everyone that's ever sat to have their picture taken in that photo booth? Well, what would you do? You would try to get out as quickly as possible, and that's what it will start doing. While you're going about the rest of your day, maybe stopping off at a few stores in the mall or complaining to the customer service staff about that faulty photo booth, it's already started climbing. Its fingernails are digging into that fleshy tissue that coats the walls of the pit as the copy drags its imperfect body upwards, crawling over the others around it that are trying to do the exact same. There's no telling just how many of them are down there, how many misshapen heads and deformed faces your clone has had to barge past and climb over as they all pile deep down within their hole in the ground. And what's the worst part of all this? It's not just the climb. The fact that your copy has to fight its way out of the pit, making the near impossible ascent to make it to the surface. No, the worst part is that you have no idea it's happening. You're completely oblivious that a distorted clone of you is raking its nails against walls of fat tissue, clambering up from underneath the ground, and even more so, you have no idea what it wants to do when it gets free and finds you. The SCP Foundation has long since been keeping an eye on the anomaly that they themselves have designated as SCP-715. Given that the photo booth itself was connected to the extra-dimensional space buried deep below the mall, removing it isn't really an option. Sure, they could have easily have cordoned it off and put up signs saying the booth was out of order to deter members of the public from trying to use it, but this was the SCP Foundation after all. They needed to run tests, figure out exactly what this anomaly did, and how it ticked. Gerald Patton had been a rising star at the Foundation, a promising researcher who had long been proving his mettle since he first became part of the organization. For a time, the higher-ups at the Foundation had planned to attach the researcher to the SCP-2090 project, studying a basketball player who somehow gained anomalous powers. However, hearing about the photo booth in the Ohio City Mall, he turned down this request to instead join the team researching SCP-715. Certain high-level staff of the SCP Foundation noted this to be strange. Patton had never turned down a promotion before, as the SCP-2090 project would have offered him better pay and more vacation time. In order to observe the photo booth closely without alerting the public to their presence, Foundation staff on site were disguised to blend in with civilians, and some posed as retail staff employed at the mall. Come closing time, once everyone else that worked there or who had been shopping throughout the day had finally left, the Foundation researchers were free to run their tests and investigate the anomalous photo booth. It was the night of a routine sweep. All staff members on site were required to test the surrounding area for reality warping anomalies. The sweep was mandatory for the entire team assigned to SCP-715, yet quite unusually, researcher Patton didn't report in for the procedure. The higher-ups at the Foundation decided to let this indiscretion slide though. After all, there were a lot of personnel involved in the process, so Patton was let off the hook. In fact, the few disparities in Patton's behavior only became more apparent when Dr. Agatha Wright began to more closely collate and process the files and information on the personnel on site. She was the research head on the SCP-715 project, and quickly noticed a few things that didn't add up about researcher Gerald Patton. His rejection of the offer to join the SCP-2090 project and refusal to attend a routine reality-bending anomaly sweep might have seemed like unrelated incidents at first, but both would have brought the researcher into contact with technology that the Foundation used specifically to detect any distortions to reality. If he had taken the promotion or been present for the sweep, he too would have been within the scope of this specialized detection equipment. Yet both times, he managed to avoid being put in such a position. What the hell was Patton hiding? And what would show up if a detector was pointed at him? Dr. Wrights was growing ever more suspicious of researcher Patton and his behavior. However, it was when she learned he had secretly tested the photo booth himself that she decided to take matters into her own hands in order to get to the bottom of what Gerald was up to. She had to mull it over and think about things cautiously. She couldn't confront him directly, at least not yet. Even the evidence she already had, that Patton had seemingly twice avoided situations involving the use of reality distortion detection equipment, wasn't enough to prove for certain he was hiding something. Both instances could have been caused by something completely unrelated. Gerald could have rejected his promotion purely because he was more interested in SCP-715 than joining the SCP-2090 project. And even Foundation personnel needed sick days or skipped work because of a hangover without telling anyone, which could explain why he was absent during the sweep of the mall. But Agatha wasn't convinced. It felt like the two instances lined up too closely. They felt far too similar to be an utterly random coincidence. Even if Gerald wasn't up to anything dangerous, the only way to know for sure was to observe him, but without drawing attention to it. He'd deny anything, act completely differently, maybe even flat out lie if he knew someone was listening or watching. Agatha was forced to think in a way that was as calculated as she was certain Gerald had been. His quarters were located in a secluded part of the sub-basement, a level above where the fleshy pit could be found. Almost all the Foundation personnel assigned to SCP-715 slept somewhere on site, their presence there masked from the ordinary mall employees. Taking care not to be detected, they had installed doors with a keycard system, meaning only members of their own staff could access the living quarters under the mall. If any civilians happened to stumble upon the Foundation and discover them, then all it took was the careful application of amnestics to ensure that they wouldn't remember a thing. Beeping her keycard at the door, Agatha slipped into the living area. It mostly consisted of a narrow corridor with rows of doors on either side. Behind each one was a cramped room, each only big enough for one person, a bunk to sleep in, and a sink with a mirror above it. Gerald's room was the furthest from the entrance, right down at the end of the corridor, as far from everyone else as he could get. Although it also meant if he came back from testing early, then he'd be more likely to catch Agatha leaving his room and walking back along the row. It would be hard to come up with an excuse as to what she was doing anywhere near his quarters, especially as her room was right behind the very first door, right next to the entrance. All this was rushing through Dr. Wrights' mind as she squeezed into Patton's room. In actual fact, the interior space of them was so limited that they were even smaller than most ship cabins. Her hand had been clasped around the handle of a metal case, which she sat down on Gerald's empty bed. Unclasping the clips that held it closed, Agatha opened up the case and took out what was held inside the inner layer of protective foam. It was the Fulman Breaker Anomalous Optical Enhancement Device, a piece of the specialized apparatus that Foundation researchers use to record and identify any person or object that might be exhibiting anomalous properties. It utilized state-of-the-art optical enhancement technology and could be used to detect whether a subject was causing any distortion to the reality around it by accessing visual spectrums that were normally imperceivable to the naked human eye, or sometimes even unobservable in this dimension. Agatha looked around the tiny cabin. Given the limited space, she was also short on options as to where she could hide the device without it being easily noticed. It was also imperative that researcher Patton had no idea he was under observation. Dr. Wrights looked over to the sink in the corner, the mirror just above it. Sure, it was a tactic taken straight out of the big book of spy novel cliches, but it would work. The advanced spectrum capabilities of the optical enhancement device would be able to record Patton through the glass. Luckily, the entire living quarters had been pretty hastily built, which meant it took little effort for Agatha to loosen the screws holding the mirror in place. But that's when she heard the distinctive beep of the door to the living quarters, followed by the gradual footsteps getting closer and closer. It might not have been Gerald, but there was also an equal chance that it could have been. Acting as fast as she could, Agatha placed the optical enhancement device on the wall and covered it with the mirror, frantically trying to screw it back into place as quick as she could. The echoing noise of someone approaching sounded as if they were almost right outside the cabin door by the time Dr. Wright had tightened the screws enough to keep the mirror in place. Giving a quick final scan of the room, making sure nothing looked too conspicuous, she grabbed the empty case and smoothed out the duvet where it had been laying, leaving no trace that she had ever been there. Her heart already racing, it almost exploded right out of her chest as she slipped back out of the door to Patton's cabin, only to see him walking down the narrow corridor directly towards his room, towards her. Dr. Wrights, Gerald greeted with a stage smile, though the suspicion on his face was so unmistakable that it could have probably shown up clearly on camera. Something I can help you with? Patton. Agatha gave a polite nod back to the researcher, lifting the case behind her back. The one upside of the tight corridor was that Patton was so close to her, he couldn't see what she was hiding. The obvious downside being he might be close enough to clock Dr. Wrights' suspicion of him. Did you need something? Patton chuckled. Sorry, it's just, what were you doing in my quarters? Her heart was still racing, desperately trying to form a plausible excuse somewhere in her mind. Agatha's free hand reached into her pocket, something brushing against her fingertips. It would have to do. You dropped this, she exclaimed, pulling out a $20 bill and handing it to Gerald, a small price to pay to keep her subterfuge. Earlier on in the mall near SCP-715, I saw it fall out of your pocket. I had other matters to attend to down at... Anyway, I wanted to make sure you got it back. Oh, thank you. Gerald blinked in surprise, taking the money. As she squeezed past him and walked out of the living quarters, Agatha could barely stop her hands from shaking, although those tremors of nerves would have to become the trembling of absolute horror when she saw the footage that the optical enhancement device collected. Patton was one of the creatures from the pit. It didn't seem possible. He didn't even have clearance to know about the pit, and any of the clones or SCP-715-As that managed to claw their way up to the surface were immediately terminated by on-site security, the instances becoming known as SCP-715-Bs if they made it that far. Yet somehow Patton, or whatever he really was, had made it through undetected, but that was far from the worst discovery Dr. Wrights would make. She used a number of the same anomalous optical enhancement devices to observe the SCP-715-A creatures within the pit, only to find that she and the other researchers had made a grave mistake. The SCP-715-As, they were all humans. What the Foundation had initially thought were the distorted, imperfect clone copies of everyone who had used the SCP-715 photo booth were actually the originals. They had been trying to climb back up because they wanted to come home. Their places taken by SCP-715-Bs. But none of those people, now twisted, disfigured, and unrecognizable, were able to explain to the Foundation who they were, and they'd been shot, left to fall back into the pit and die. Acting fast, Dr. Wrights updated the classification of SCP-715 to Keter, although this was later rescinded back to safe. The creature that looked like researcher Patton was apprehended and brought in for interrogation. After learning the truth behind SCP-715, the photo booth was secured and locked up permanently. But as of now, the project investigating SCP-715 has been put on hold. No one at the Foundation wants to admit their mistake, that they now have an extra-dimensional pit full of innocent, distorted people, or that they have no idea where all their body-swapped counterparts are.
You're on a road trip, the kind that stretches over days on end, and you need to make multiple stops along the way to refuel the car and yourself. The last time you remember stopping to get more gas and a bite to eat was back in Wyoming, and now you're in the heart of Montana. Thankfully, like an oasis in the desert, you see the town of Clearwater off in the distance. It's a vibrant, welcoming little place, a perfect slice of classic small-town Americana. You took a similar trip last year, and vaguely remember stopping at Clearwater that time too, and you're glad to be back. In particular, you remember the Old Prairie Diner, a folksy little place with the most delicious huckleberry pie you ever tasted. Perhaps it's about time for you to give it another try. You fill up your tank and stop at the diner. The food tastes just as good as you remember, but one thing is off. The entire staff seems to have changed. It is the exact same diner you ate at a year ago, no doubt about that, but it looks like everyone from the waitstaff to the cashier to the cooks have all been replaced. You try your best not to think about it. After all, businesses are allowed to replace their staff. But the longer you sit in the diner, the more uncomfortable the feelings become. You need to ask someone, just to push away the fears that you're not going crazy. When the waiter passes by, you compliment the food and mention you ate here last year too. You ask the unfamiliar waiter if they had worked here back then. They confirm that yes, they've always worked here, and so has everybody else. The diner is a family business. You leave town not too long after that, feeling vaguely unsettled. And as a voice on the radio warns about the incoming rain, you tell yourself that you never want to return to the town of Clearwater, Montana. As you leave, the memory of the town seems to fade from your mind in real time. But little do you know, the people of Clearwater will never be able to leave, ever. It's because something horrifying will happen in Clearwater every single year. And that thing is known to the SCP Foundation as SCP-3300. This annual anomalous event is Clearwater's own local curse, always occurring around mid-June. While many of the mechanics of this event still elude the Foundation's understanding, the outcome is well documented. Every single inhabitant of the town is replaced by a person who didn't previously exist. While some elements may carry over from their original counterparts, every person involved will simply be a whole new person, with no memories of the change or who they once were. The process known as SCP-3300 lasts between 6 and 18 days, and once the process has begun, it's impossible for any outsiders to intervene. It begins with rain, a light, dreary drizzle at first, but each day the rain gets worse. Soon it's a storm, and then a maelstrom. Flooding, hurricanes, tornadoes, all centered around Clearwater, but cutting off neatly just beyond it. What happens in Clearwater remains in Clearwater, and when the process has concluded and the sun shines once more, everybody has been changed. Whenever the Foundation has tried to send personnel or equipment into Clearwater during SCP-3300, one of two things has happened. In the more favorable scenarios, those attempting to enter Clearwater have simply appeared on the other side of the city limits. In the less positive instances, personnel and equipment have been lost forever within. There is no stopping or even understanding SCP-3300. According to Foundation records, Clearwater has been around at least as long as the Foundation itself, perhaps even longer. Clearwater has been able to undergo its yearly nightmare without intrusion due to a unique cognitohazardous effect, which creates a kind of mental block around memories of the town for outsiders. You won't forget Clearwater per se, but you will find it increasingly hard to focus on, like something you can only ever see out of the corner of your eye. There is no saving the people of Clearwater. The horror will play out again and again and again. The Foundation has no first-hand knowledge of what happens in Clearwater during those horrifying 18 days. But one account they have hints at a terrifying possibility. During an excursion into Clearwater, the Foundation managed to collect a diary belonging to a woman named Margaret Lane. To the best of our knowledge, Margaret Lane no longer exists. But if the contents of her diary aren't to be believed, then what goes on in Clearwater during SCP-3300 is far worse than we ever imagined. Margaret first started her diary not long before SCP-3300's 1995 iteration began. She was in the middle of a tumultuous time in her life, freshly clean from alcohol and drug addiction, forced to live with her antagonistic mother, and having peculiar and distressing dreams. In the first dream Margaret recorded, she was someone else, a woman living in a small hut perhaps a century ago or more. It was plague time. She was looking down upon her daughter, bedridden, her skin covered in painful-looking red blotches. Her husband was already dead. That's when another man enters, a healthy man. He tells her that he's found their salvation, and then the dream ended. Margaret woke up to a gray, dreary day. There were clouds on the horizon. The rain was coming. It drizzled for the next few days before getting more intense, as one would expect from an SCP-3300 cycle. Of course, nothing seemed out of place to Margaret. Life carried on. She continued to stay clean, resisting the offers of her old dealer, though her relationship with her mother remained frosty. The rain started to get worse as voices on the radio insisted that conditions would continue to become more severe over the next few days. They tried their best to maintain normality, Margaret invited some friends, Jared, Sam, Mike, and Isabel, to come over and play D&D at her place. That was when all hell broke loose. While the group roleplayed, there was a furious banging at the door, like whoever was knocking was trying to bash the door down. When Margaret's mom opened the door to investigate the commotion, she saw that an entire family was standing there, a father, a mother, and 2 young children. The father immediately began furiously asking why all these strangers were in his house. When Margaret's mother tried to tell him that this wasn't his house, he became increasingly agitated and walked straight into the home. Margaret's friends attempted to subdue him, but he threw them off, displaying a supernatural strength. Margaret's mom ran in with a golf club and struck the mysterious man in the chest. There was a nasty splat, but he didn't seem to react. The golf club was just embedded in his chest, having broken the skin and sunken in, but there was no blood, just dripping water. The father then pulled the golf club out of his chest and began beating Margaret's mother to death with it, all while repeating "my house" again and again, while his wife and children watched with broad, sunny smiles in the rain. Somehow Margaret knew that her mother was beyond saving, and that there was no way of defeating these things in a physical confrontation. All they could do was run out to Jared's van with the rest of the group and hightail it to the police station. But when they arrived at the station, the doors were barred and it appeared empty. As the torrential rain hammered down from above, there was nothing left to do but drive out of town and try to escape whatever madness was going on here. But that was easier said than done. They drove for what seemed like hours on end as the rain and the howling wind persisted. Jared had been injured during the fight with the strange family, and his health deteriorated further as the drive stretched on. They should have left the town of Clearwater a long time ago, but it seemed like they were nowhere. It wasn't long before Jared was lying dead in the back of the van, and now there were only 4 of them left. They kept driving, afraid, grieving, hungry, and tired, and Margaret took the opportunity to sleep. It was no time to rest, but she was so exhausted that she had no choice. Margaret had a continuation of her earlier dream. The different her, the dream her, was laying the plague-ridden body of her daughter in the river, but she wasn't the only one. All the villages of her settlement were placing the bodies of their dead in the river as the water washed around them and through them. The bodies became one with the water, and then they became the water. The water was everything. When Margaret awoke, it was to the horrifying sounds of bubbling and boiling. That's when she saw that Jared's body was dissolving. No, not dissolving, evaporating. It was bubbling and convulsing like it was made of water until the entire thing burst into a cascade of hot steam. After that, Margaret and the others left the vehicle and refused to get back inside. Nothing was making sense. It was like something out of a nightmare. As they walked, the rain hammered down upon them. They couldn't have been walking for more than a mile when they crashed into something. It was a sign, "Welcome to Clearwater." It was like that the town itself had drawn them back. Mike refused to return to the town of his own free will and began walking in the other direction. Moments later, he was walking back towards them in silence, though he never intended to. SCP-3300 had distorted his path and brought him back. It was clear that Mike was shaken to the core by the experience, but they had to press on. They would head to the grocery store for food, and then to a sporting goods store where they could hopefully grab some guns to fight the violent, altered people who'd somehow appeared with the rain. But things didn't go to plan, or what little plan there even was. Mike shot himself on the first night at Dirk's Sporting Goods, leaving only Margaret, Sam, and Isabel alive. Perhaps one of the most terrifying details of Mike's death was the fact he didn't even bleed. Instead, the gaping exit wound in the back of his head was just full of water. Water was all that seemed to be left of them. Sam, seemingly driven to the edge by the sight of Mike's death, grabbed a hunting knife to perform an experiment. She'd cut it into her own skin, and was horrified to see only water dripping out. They'd all been changed, and they didn't know why. That's when the survivors noticed something else. There were people standing outside in the rain, hundreds of them. Not a single one they could recognize. All new people, waiting. Sam said only one word, "outside," before walking out of the hunting goods store and disappearing into the crowd and the rain, never to be seen again. Margaret mused that perhaps in the end, she had the right idea. To be taken, killed, erased, or changed would be inevitable. In the final entry in Margaret's diary, dreams blend with reality as her mind finally gives out from the terror. She realizes in her final moments that there is no way out. There is no escape. There is only water. Water is eternal. The rain is eternal. All will be changed. And given the fact that no trace of Margaret was ever found save for her diary, all her fears turned out to be right. She was taken and replaced by SCP-3300, just as will inevitably happen to all the current citizens of Clearwater the next time SCP-3300 rolls around. It will be as inevitable and as indifferent to those it affects as tomorrow's sunrise. You cannot change the rain, but believe us, in Clearwater, Montana, the rain can change you. In June of 1985, Mark Johnson and his wife of 10 years, Sophie, were on vacation in Myrtle Beach having a great time. While they relaxed on the sand, Sophie decided to take a picture of her husband for their scrapbook. So she pulled out the Polaroid Supercolor 645 that she'd bought specifically for the trip. She pressed the button, waiting for the picture to print, pulled it out, and shook it. What she expected to see was a shot of Mark lying on his beach towel. What she got was a picture of her husband in the arms of his secretary. They say that a picture speaks 1,000 words, but this particular camera takes pictures that are worth even more than that. When developed, the pictures taken with this normal-looking Polaroid camera reveal the innermost desires of the person being photographed. Welcome to the story of SCP-978. The Desire Camera. The main reason the Foundation keeps SCP-978 under wraps is due to its use as an easy form of blackmail. All anyone with access to the camera would have to do is snap a few covert photos, and they'd have instant dirt on the world's most powerful people. To further stop this camera from falling into the wrong hands, the containment guidelines strictly forbid the use of the camera for anything other than simple documentation, and all uses of it must be thoroughly logged and checked. So, now that you know what the camera does, it's time to look at what kinds of strange and mysterious photos it's taken. After all, who doesn't want a chance to gain insight into the minds of the Foundation's most famous and dangerous inmates? First, to serve as a control, the team took a photo of a blue office chair. No change was recorded, proving that the camera didn't work on non-anomalous inanimate objects. Some of the earliest tests of the camera were the photos that the research team took of each other. One by one, the doctors and their assistants were photographed in neutral poses, smiling as if for a completely normal photo. Then they waited while the photos developed like normal Polaroids. Most of the research team had minimal changes in their photos. One was shown slouched in his chair drinking from a flask. One was shown in her civilian clothes, getting ready to go home from work. One doctor was in the exact same pose, but with a different colored tie on. The last assistant photographed, however, had their picture come out wildly different than how they were posed. Their desire revealed by the camera was so shocking that it had to be redacted, and the assistant was placed on temporary psychiatric leave. Following this first successful test, the doctor in charge of the project ordered a second round of tests to be conducted, this time on a series of D-Class personnel. A picture of one D-Class, who was photographed while eating in the cafeteria, showed up as scuba diving on vacation with his wife and child. He was allowed to keep the picture afterwards. Another had a similar result. He was photographed in a neutral pose like the members of the research team had been, and when the picture developed, the D-Class was seen holding a smiling baby, whom he identified as his 1-year-old daughter. After that, the results of the SCP-978 test started to get a little, well, weird. A notoriously twisted D-Class known as 7294 was photographed in his cell, and when the Polaroid developed, he was in the same cell playing a cello made out of a dismembered mannequin. D-217-017 was a late-stage victim of SCP-217, a virus that turns organic matter into metal. You would assume that her innermost desire would be to be cured of her disease, but when she was photographed in her cell, the resulting Polaroid showed her completely made of metal, kneeling and praying at the base of a black obelisk. One D-Class, who had been rendered comatose and was on life support, was photographed in their hospital room. Their picture showed them as only a limp, deflated skin in their photo. The photograph of another D-Class, who had become increasingly listless and apathetic since their integration into the D-Class program, resulted in a picture that was exactly the same as they appeared in reality, except the light in their cell was slightly dimmer. Intrigued by these results, the research team wanted to see how the camera would react to SCP-148, a type of metal that blocks the psychic properties of other SCPs. A helmet was made from the material and placed on a D-Class who was given an adult magazine to read while his photo was taken. When the photo was developed, it was extremely blurry. Upon close analysis, the figure of the D-Class reading the magazine could still be made out, and around him the faint images of several nude people could be seen. The research team wanted to see if the results were the same when the camera was used on animals. Photos of the lab mice and rabbits showed them eating or mating in their respective Polaroids. A zebra finch was shown escaping its cage, while a guard dog and its handler were shown playing fetch in the park. When cockroaches were photographed, there was no difference visible between the picture and reality. But the most exciting test results came when the camera was tested on other SCPs. For a few of the SCPs tested, there was no visible difference between the picture and reality. This was the case for SCP-173 the Sculpture, SCP-343 nicknamed God, SCP-014, an immortal man who is, over time, being turned into concrete, and SCP-063, the world's best toothbrush. When SCP-035, better known as the Possessive Mask, was photographed in its glass case, the picture showed an unidentified individual wearing the mask, sitting on a throne and surrounded by 3 masked corpses. The team took a picture of SCP-043, a haunted copy of the White Album that was being interrogated while on a turntable. In the picture, the album was being returned to its sleeve. They then photographed SCP-049 the Plague Doctor standing in his cell. In the picture, the Plague Doctor is hugging an unidentified small child and surrounded by instances of SCP-049-2. When they took a picture of SCP-050, a mischievous statue of a monkey reading a book, the result was predictably playful, given that SCP's history of pulling pranks. The photo that came out of the camera showed the camera itself, with another picture of itself coming out of the developing slot. Microscopic analysis revealed that this recursive photography kept going until the cameras in the pictures of the other cameras were too small to see. The team next photographed SCP-053, the young girl, and the photo was taken as the young girl was drawing with crayons in her cell. In the picture, she was riding through a sunny field on the back of her friend SCP-682. SCP-053 and SCP-682 were even wearing matching bows, dresses, and pink nail polish. When they took a picture of SCP-096, the Shy Guy though, the picture showed SCP-096's cell with nothing in it. SCP-085, the living 2D sketch known as Cassie, was photographed tinkering with a drawn car. In the developed photo, Cassie was engaged in the same activity, but both she and the car were now 3-dimensional. The team took a photo of SCP-106, the Old Man, emerging from a wall within his cell. When the photo developed, it showed the old man roaming a wheat field near an old farmhouse. From the porch of the farmhouse, an older woman is greeting SCP-106 with open arms. They also took a photo of SCP-168, a sentient calculator sitting on a table in its containment cell. In the picture, a teenage boy is seen doing complex math homework using the calculator. Next to him on the table are thick textbooks with titles like Complicated Math, Difficult Math, and Math You Need Your Calculator For. The photo of SCP-261, a vending machine that dispenses snack products from alternate universes, showed the SCP in its usual hallway, almost completely buried in coins. SCP-507, an otherwise normal man who unwillingly teleports between dimensions, was photographed while eating in the cafeteria. The developed picture showed him dressed as a Foundation researcher talking to other researchers. When SCP-682 was photographed, floating in its containment tank, the resulting picture showed the SCP surrounded by the corpses of all of the Foundation staff and mauling the person who had taken the photo. A researcher's note accompanying this photo reads, "Well, that was predictable." Yes, it was. Just for the fun of it, the team also tested the camera's effects on a few other Foundation personnel. They took a photo of Dr. Bright while he was arguing with Dr. Clef. The picture that came out showed a tombstone engraved with the words, "Jack Bright, resting at last." The team also took a photo of Dr. Clef as he stormed out in a huff following the argument. Given that Clef's face cannot be photographed, they were curious as to what the results would be. The picture showed little difference compared to reality, save for the fact that Clef's head was replaced by an image of a hand making a rude gesture. Upon closer examination of the photo, the team also realized that there was a young girl in the background who, strangely, had cloven hooves instead of feet. A young SCP-166 perhaps. The team then took a photo of Dr. Fisher holding his pet hamster. Contrary to expectations, the picture revealed not Dr. Fisher's desires, but the hamster's, showing the hamster sleeping peacefully in its cage, with Dr. Fisher nowhere to be seen. As you can see from these test logs, the effects of the camera are, well, inconsistent, with some photos showing very immediate, simple whims, and others showing the subject's deepest and most secret desires. While the researchers working with SCP-978 seem like they had a lot of fun getting to peek into the minds of all their coworkers and test subjects, there's no telling what kind of pandemonium could be unleashed if someone on the outside ever got a chance to use it. Thankfully, the camera, which has been classified as safe for obvious reasons, is kept securely in security locker HJ12 at Site-17, which means none of us have to worry about our own pictures taken by the Desire camera leaking out. But if someone did get the camera out and took your picture, what do you think they'd see? From gigantic, indestructible, self-regenerating reptiles to enormous tentacled telepathic organisms, it should come as no surprise that the SCP Foundation has gone head-to-head against a lot of large-scale aggressors, or LSAs, in its time. Naturally, a creature of heightened size and aggression can often prove challenging to contain, and the threat these LSAs pose is often far too big to ignore. But anyone familiar with the Foundation will tell you, they're not above using any methods necessary to keep these creatures contained. Huge vats of molecular acid, impenetrable cells, disposable D-class personnel, even other SCPs. But what other SCPs could possibly be big enough and tough enough to handle some of the Foundation's biggest and baddest? Meet SCP-5514. Otherwise known as the Dragonslayer. While it might sound like something out of an anime, SCP-5514 is a massive robotic mech designed to take on the worst other SCPs can throw at it. For any who are unfamiliar with the term, a mech or mecha usually refers to an upright standing machine or automaton controlled by a human pilot. What distinguishes a mech from a vehicle is their often humanoid shape, standing bipedally, and they are often hundreds of meters tall. All of this is true of SCP-5514, and in fact, given that it requires a trained member of Foundation staff to operate it, the mech itself requires very little in the way of containment. Only members of Mobile Task Force Eta-5 are trained and authorized to pilot SCP-5514. This is one of the SCP Foundation's specialized units, specifically designed to deal with the threat of large-scale aggressors, much like SCP-5514 itself. But SCP-5514 wasn't discovered or captured by the Foundation for use for the containment of LSAs, nor was it stolen from a foreign military or found buried under the ground. Then, where did it come from, and who built it? Working with the Global Occult Coalition and the government of High Brazil, an anomalous island off the west coast of Ireland, the Foundation themselves constructed SCP-5514 using various anomalous methods and techniques. In 1988, a Foundation site was destroyed by an unidentified LSA, highlighting the inadequacy of the current defenses against these larger, more damage-resistant creatures. The Foundation, the Coalition, and High Brazil formed a joint operation, the Key Project, and examined SCP-2406, an automaton 93 meters tall thought to be created by ancient mechanites. Together, the Key Project opted to create their own similar machine, viewing it as the best way to defend against further incursions with large-scale aggressors. The construction of SCP-5514 began in 1990. The intention of all parties involved in the Key Project, including the Foundation, was that the Dragonslayer would be deployed in the event of an attack by an LSA. It would arrive at cities under attack and immediately engage large-scale aggressors in combat. Building of the mech continued at a consistent pace for 8 years. However, it was the occurrence of SCP-5391 and subsequent intervention by the O5 Council that accelerated the creation of the Dragonslayer by any means necessary. On June 30th, 1998, a number of seismic disturbances were detected, including tsunamis, tremors, and volcanic activity both underwater and above ground. What followed was the appearance of multiple large-scale aggressors, which would soon become designated as SCP-5391. The exact kind of scenario that the Dragonslayer was being built for had already arrived, and the mech was still far from completion. While the Foundation and its allies deployed forces to drive the enormous creatures back to the ocean, something needed to be done to bring SCP-5514 into the fight, and fast. The O5 Council authorized the use of anomalous materials in the continued construction of the Dragonslayer, both to speed up the process and have it ready for deployment, but also to give the mech every advantage against the abundance of large-scale aggressors from SCP-5391. As a result, SCP-5514 was designed to incorporate features and technology far beyond that of any conventional military-grade weapons. The first hurdle: how do you power a machine the size of SCP-5514? Naturally, with the most gigantic nuclear furnace there is, the Sun. More specifically, a perpetually stable miniaturized sun known as SCP-037. Even though it only has a diameter of 2 inches, this little sucker is better than premium fuel. The surface temperature of SCP-037 is around 5,000 Kelvin, generating plenty of energy to power the SCP-5514 mech. Stored in the Dragonslayer's chest, this mini-sun is kept stable by subdimensional portals that vent excess energy off this plane of reality, stopping the mech, its pilot, and anything around it from melting. In fact, SCP-037 produces so much juice that only 1% of its energy output is enough to fully power SCP-5514. Now that's the power source sorted, but how do you solve the weight problem? Given the sheer size of SCP-5514, it would be easy for it to be cumbersome and potentially cause catastrophic collateral damage to its surrounding area. Well, the mech's weight is a problem for somewhere else. A whole other dimension, in fact. Much like the excess heat from its power source, various heavy portions of the SCP-5514 mech have their weight shunted off to a tiny pocket dimension. It was ensured during the creation of the mech that this alteration was perfectly calculated, so that SCP-5514 wouldn't lose any mass or density, so it operates as if it were only a fraction of its actual weight. Of course, being weightless makes flight a whole lot easier. Oh, did we forget to mention that? SCP-5514 can fly as well. This feature actually became a part of the mech completely by accident during the construction of SCP-5514, when an attempt to regulate the mech's internal circulation of air led to it having its own gravity field. This allowed SCP-5514 to fly without the aid of any turbines or other means. While this was an unintentional mistake, no attempt has ever been made to correct for it, for fear that it could lead to SCP-5514 being grounded permanently. Naturally, going up against creatures so large that they require their own subcategory means that SCP-5514 needs an equally formidable arsenal. So let's move on to talk weaponry. Mounted on the mech's shoulder is a Beowulf Sigurd railgun, an anomalous weapon that also doesn't obey the laws of physics at all. The Beowulf Sigurd uses alternate gravity to affect the weight of its targets, causing projectiles to impact with higher velocity. Even the thickest-skinned LSAs wouldn't want to be staring down the barrel end of one of those. Big guns aside, the SCP-5514 mech also wields a cold iron sword. Over 65 feet long, this weapon was contributed to the Dragonslayer by the High Brazil Royal Court, members of the collaborative key project that created the mech. Sure, a large-scale aggressor with thicker hide might take a few extra swings to draw blood, but it will feel those swings for a long time after, since any wounds inflicted by the cold iron sword will not regenerate. Serving as less of an offensive weapon, the SCP-5514 mech also features a unique armament known as the 1,000-word arrows. As pretentious as it might sound, within the mech are 7 poets. Their role is to write and recite poems that detail the slaying of monsters, and these recitals are then broadcast from the Dragonslayer. On the surface, this seems to have no practical applications during a fight with LSAs. However, the goal of the 1,000-word arrows is a form of psychological warfare. The recital of poems telling of the mech's victory and the defeat of large-scale aggressors is intended to have the effect of demoralizing SCP-5514's adversaries, while encouraging the pilot during combat. Additionally, worn atop the head of the SCP-5514 mech, almost like a hat, is a discus with plasma-coated edges. If the Dragonslayer needs to deal damage at range, then it can hurl this disc and recall it immediately thanks to built-in electromagnets. In emergency scenarios, if the Cold Iron Sword is damaged or dropped and irretrievable, SCP-5514 is also equipped with an additional melee weapon. Stored in the right arm of the mech is a holdout plasma wrist blade. This superheated blade is strong enough to cut through almost anything. However, this blade is strictly to be used as a backup weapon. Finally, should all else fail, one of SCP-5514's greatest strengths can also be used as a deadly weapon. The emergency sun vent allows a fraction of the excess power from SCP-037 to be released, at the risk of causing massive damage, not only to LSAs, but to any civilians or structures nearby. It is because of the destructive risk involved that this weapon is only authorized to be used as a final resort. And luckily, SCP-5514 is currently undefeated. Since the arrival of multiple large-scale aggressors as a result of SCP-5391, the SCP-5514 mech has managed to successfully eliminate 12 of these LSA creatures, either by terminating or otherwise incapacitating them. Given that its completion was fast-tracked through the use of anomalous elements, SCP-5514's first combat deployments also served as field tests of the mech's operation and the various weapons and features. Arriving in Tokyo, overseen by the Foundation's own Captain Rosales and Dr. Kaori, SCP-5514's first target was a creature designated LSA Wake-02, as well as several other unidentified large creatures. As the LSA was about to attack Tokyo Harbor, SCP-5514 was dispatched, its arrival heralded by the 1,000-word arrows. "Champion, champion, exalt in the glory of the Dragonslayer," the poets recited. Surprisingly, the poetry worked. Hearing it had a noticeable effect on LSA Wake-02, causing the creature to back away shrieking. With a single throw of the rounded, recoiling plasma, SCP-5514 immediately beheaded Wake-02, damaging a number of the other nearby LSAs as it retrieved the disc via its electromagnets. Once again, the 1,000-word arrows cheered on the mech and the pilot reciting, "The vicious beast slain, gone to those which were once bane." After dispatching several of the minor LSAs with its Cold Iron Sword, SCP-5514 became aware that Wake-02 was not fully down for the count. A second head had protruded from the mouth of the creature's first, issuing some sort of retreat call to the remaining LSAs in Tokyo Harbor. This second head then shot towards SCP-5514, narrowly missing its leg but allowing other LSAs to close the distance and prepare an attack. Luckily, the SCP-5514 mech's sword cleaved the beast in two. The mech began firing on the remains of Wake-02 with its Beowulf Sigurd railgun, launching itself into the air and flying towards the target while bringing its Cold Iron Sword down through the air. With a single motion, SCP-5514 brought the blade all the way down the LSA's body, from the creature's head to its caudal fin, gutting the large-scale aggressor and splitting its entire body in two. After one final squirm, both halves were finally still. SCP-5514 had passed its first field test. The mech functioned exactly as designed, all its various weapons and features working in tandem to defeat a creature far too large and powerful for any conventional force to handle. And thus the deed was done. Exalt, exalt in the glory of the Dragonslayer. The 1,000-word arrows called out as the other LSAs retreated. One cannot help but feel cautiously optimistic about our chances of survival, knowing that the Foundation has SCP-5514 as the first line of defense against huge, monstrous beings that threaten humanity. As the situation with SCP-5391 continues, the SCP-5514 mech remains on the front line, standing between innocent human beings and the looming shapes of multiple large-scale aggressors. With creatures that pose such a large-scale threat, It certainly is lucky that disparate groups were able to put aside their differences and work together to build a large-scale mech, and because they did, now we have the Dragonslayer on our side. The ocean is a terrifying place. We've all heard the statistics. More than 80% of the ocean remains unexplored. That's most of the water covering the globe, completely unmapped and unobserved by science. It's a scary thought to dwell on, realizing that there's more water than land on Earth, and the sheer expanse of that water is so large that we've been unable to fully explore all of it. Just think, there are places in the ocean that have never been seen by a human. Who knows what's down there? If there was ever a personification of fear of the unknown, the ocean could definitely be it. Ancient shipwrecks sunk to the ocean floor, unknown sea creatures hiding away from humanity, and the general isolation of the suffocating dark blue the ocean swallows its victims with. All of these images that come to mind when thinking about the vast and mysterious depths of the sea. And no one is more familiar with nautical mysteries than the SCP Foundation. Today we'll be taking a look at SCP-5007, the Bass Strait, a wave of oceanic anomalies fit to make any seasoned sailor shiver in fear. The Bass Strait is an area of ocean dividing Tasmania and the Australian mainland. It's also the location of an unusually high amount of disappearances. Sailors disappearing from their ships, fishermen leaving in the night and never coming back, even civilians disappearing from the shores that connect to the strait. The Foundation was aware of these disappearances since 1858, but were only able to craft theories about what was causing them. Was it an anomalous group of interest, hostile aerial entities patrolling the skies above the strait, phenomenon associated with unidentified flying objects? What about subterranean anomalies, weather patterns, or time dilation? For nearly a century, the Foundation was unable to determine the cause of the high number of disappearances in the Bass Strait, and then the phenomenon suddenly revealed itself. In 1980, on a beach connected to the strait, Agent Taberner, an operative of the SCP Foundation, was vacationing with his wife Mary and his 3 young children. The Taberner family was simply enjoying their day when they saw what looked like balloons in the sky. They were approaching quickly, and naturally the family moved closer. What happened next was a whirlwind, and those balloons the family were so interested in lifted them up from the ground and carried them away. Agent Taberner tried to fight back, but there was nothing he could do, except report to the Foundation what had occurred, and the organization responded in full force. The Foundation's research discovered that reports of UFOs and lights in the sky had coincided with many disappearances in the strait, and that this was a pattern. The search for the 4 lost Taberner family members had become a large-scale investigation into unexplained disappearances along the Bass Strait, and within 3 weeks, it was determined that these patterns were consistent across the entirety of the strait's coastal regions. Some witnesses were interviewed, but the vast majority of these abduction cases had no witnesses whatsoever. Of the minimal reports filed, the Foundation was told that there were lights in the sky, and that appearance of unidentified flying objects described as having the appearances of balloons. One such witness interviewed was a man by the name of Alan Stewart, a witness who was present during the disappearance of former Australian Prime Minister Harold Holt, whose disappearance the Foundation believed may have had a connection to the Bass Strait anomalies. During the interview, Stewart claimed that Holt and his family, while voyaging on their yacht, decided to leave the boat and go for a swim. Holt turned to Stewart and asked him if he could see the balloons around the cliff. Stewart had no idea what Holt was talking about, but Holt was insistent on seeing them. He swam deeper out into the ocean, saying that they weren't normal balloons and that there was someone inside of them. Stewart and Holt's family called out for him to come to shore, but he wouldn't listen. Stewart tried to rationalize what he saw next. Maybe it was the current sweeping Holt away, but he couldn't lie to the Foundation interviewer. Stewart saw Holt go further and further out into the water, and suddenly the Prime Minister turned around. He began swimming in the opposite direction, and he was screaming. Suddenly, Holt was lifted from the sea and pulled into the air by something emerging from the clouds. The Foundation thanked Stewart for the interview and continued their investigation. 2 years later, in 1982, emergency services received a large number of calls pertaining to UFO sightings off the coast of Norman Bay, Victoria.
The Foundation was quick to respond, alerting task forces and local sites to prepare for an investigation. Upon arriving to the scene, they confirmed the existence of multiple entities that would later be documented as SCP-5007. They evacuated civilians from the area and successfully managed to capture the creature, which was later transported to Site 40 for containment. It was a sight to behold. The entity, now designated SCP-5007-S1, was a cluster of human bodies fused between a grouping of black tentacles of varying length. Each tentacle was fused to the skin it touched directly. The stomachs of the corpses were grossly swollen and distorted to massive sizes to hold large quantities of gases inside, the buoyancy of which the entity used to achieve a passive flight. Across the entity's surface were clusters of eyes and bioluminescent glowing organs. Many of the humanoid components of the corpses appeared to have been removed and misplaced across various parts of the entity's body. What's more is that the Foundation discovered that human portions of SCP-5007 appeared somewhat cognizant and aware of their situation. Their vocalizations were incoherent and barely understandable, consisting of gasping and whimpering, but the corpses were observed to implore other individuals to approach them when encountered. SCP-5007's behavior during abduction scenarios was documented during the initial containment event, and due to the Foundation's painstaking research, a pattern was established between all SCP-5007 encounters. First, the victim would be alone, or otherwise vulnerable in a coastal location. SCP-5007 haven't shown a preference for weather, be they clear or hostile skies, but they have localized all of their activity to the Bass Strait, in small coastal towns, beaches, or boats. SCP-5007 will then move towards the shore, stalking the victim before lowering its tentacles and appendages to grab the individual, snatching them into the sky. An SCP-5007 instance can even abduct multiple people at once. One event observed had 8 men from the decks of a commercial fishing boat taken into the sky in under 15 seconds. Once captured, SCP-5007 instances will dart across the water at a high speed and take their victims to an unknown location. Discovering where SCP-5007 took their victims became a top priority for the Foundation. After extensive witness interviews and compiling a database of likely victims, they determined that there must be at least 16 instances of SCP-5007 unaccounted for. Personnel kept a close watch on the coastlines and waters of the Bass Strait, and equipped various marine task forces with research vessels capable of tracking any instances if they encountered them. In 1985, the Foundation's research efforts paid off, and several survey teams operating in the area reported a sighting of an extremely large SCP-5007 instance heading towards a coastal town. A mobile task force was sent to track the entity. The team observed the entity from afar as it stalked a private fishing boat. Even from the distance, Foundation personnel recognized the likenesses of several missing persons as faces of the corpses of SCP-5007. The task force captain had to remind his team to keep it together, claiming that they were not people, but just parts of the specimen. But everyone secretly knew the truth. The fishing vessel was a private one, occupied by a small family. The entity slowly approached and quickly pulled a woman into the air. The family panicked and quickly tried to reach cover for safety, running into the ship's cabin. The entity ran its tentacles along the boat until it pulled the door open, snatching another 2 victims. The task force was unable to help them, as their mission was to track the instance to its origin point. It was a horror to watch. The task force implanted a tracking beacon onto the entity and quietly followed it out to sea over the next 4 hours. They then discovered a large gray reef with several shipwrecks dotted across it. 13 SCP-5007 instances floated over the area, some holding on to the land reef with their tentacles. The entity dropped the abductees from the fishing boat, who were coerced by the entities into diving into a massive pool of water located in the center of the reef. One by one, each abductee was pulled below the surface by something lurking in the pool, all while the SCP-5007 instances watched. Disgusted, the task force reported what they observed to the main site, and the reef would be designated as SCP-5007-A. The Foundation's analysis of the reef led to the discovery that the rock covering it seeped iron oxide from an unknown source, and the rocks achieved growth at an anomalously fast rate, often as little as 40 minutes. All of the wrecked ships and aircraft that washed across the shore of the reef were covered with a dark stone. The reef was teeming with anomalous marine life, including SCP-5007, a red algae that fed upon the freshly grown rock, marine worms capable of levitation, spiders that lived in silk retreats underneath the waterline, small fish, and giant organisms resembling large clumps of kelp, which the Foundation had previously documented as SCP-4159 in a separate investigation. SCP-5007 often rested their tentacles on the outcroppings of the reef while inactive, but what caught the Foundation's attention the most was the giant pit located in the reef's center. Unmanned exploration drones found that it had a depth of at least 4,000 meters, and water samples taken from the pit revealed large quantities of human DNA, prehistoric bacteria, and unknown compounds that possess significant life-preserving qualities. When a being was submerged in the compound, they were able to survive heavy injuries, even when fully surrounded by the liquid and unable to breathe. The Foundation's exploration of one of these shipwrecks led them to a journal. Most of it was illegible due to water damage, but one passage survived, located in the back of the book. It detailed the experience of an unknown crew member of the ship caught in a storm. It reads, "Moresby spied land ahead, and the boys said that there are giant balloons hanging over the island. We are all afeard, but there is naught we can do but beach ourselves and hope for rescue. Should I be killed in the crash, I want my mates to give this journal to my Mary. Might know I spent my last thinking only of her." The interior of the ship contained human remains inside, but there were less skeletons than the Foundation would expect for a ship of its size. The location of the rest of the bodies was unknown. Another event related to SCP-5007 the Foundation documented involved Frederick Valentik, a pilot engaged in a training flight over the Bass Strait in 1978. Valentik's disappearance was marked by his latest communication with air traffic control, when he mistook an SCP-5007 instance for an unidentified aircraft. "It seems like it's stationary. What I'm doing right now is orbiting, and the thing is just orbiting on top of me. Also, it's got a green light and it's sort of metallic, like it's all shiny on the outside." Shortly after this, Valentik's transmission was interrupted by what was described as metallic scraping sounds, believed to be the SCP-5007 instance attacking the aircraft and jamming its propellers with its mass. After crashing into the reef, it was believed that Valentik and his aircraft were pulled beneath the surface of the pit, just as the abductees had been prior. The Foundation decided to construct a provisional secure research facility on the reef. They named it Site-40-R, and documented all returns and departures of SCP-5007. They also set up a series of containment procedures that resulted in SCP-5007 returning with its victims 83% less often than before the site's construction. But this was short-lived. In 2008, the site logged over 36 instances returning to the reef, with only 2 not having any fresh abductees. The instances' origins were unknown, and it was as if they appeared out of thin air. No other monitoring post had documented their appearance, or even spotted them before they arrived at the reef. It was years later in 2017 that the Foundation eventually was able to successfully explore what was deep inside the pit at the center of the reef. They already knew that there was a large entity lurking beneath, as evidenced by what happened to the victims of SCP-5007 that were later deposited inside the pool. All previous attempts to explore the pool were met with failure, as the water pressure of the pit's depths caused all craft to collapse due to hull damage. This time, however, they managed to construct a high-tech submarine, labeled the SCPs Nautilus, which was capable of diving a maximum of 13,500 meters underwater. They decided that a D-Class personnel would be trained to man the submersible and carry out the exploration. The mission was simple. The Nautilus was to dive to the bottom of the pit and to describe the depth readings. Cameras and microphones were equipped to the vessel. Due to the depth, remote viewing of the footage was impossible. Instead, the Foundation had to physically recollect the vessel in order to view the footage. Upon recovery, some of the footage suffered data corruption, but what was there shook those who viewed it to their core. The footage showed the D-Class's experience going deeper inside the pit. At first, it seemed ordinary. The trench had a number of rocky outcroppings dotted with black-yellow vines growing along the walls. Also present were various marine life forms, such as the spiders or the fish. Going deeper, the sub observed an SCP-5007 instance clinging to an outcropping. Several tendrils emerging from the pit's depths were wrapped around the instance and holding on to the entity, as if it were feeding from it. Another 16 SCP-5007 instances were seen resting along the walls, each clinging to the outcropping. As the sub went deeper, the D-Class remarked that there were dozens of plane and shipwrecks, but also well over 100 SCP-5007 entities. Most of them were held there by the Black Tendrils. The D-Class, as the sub went even deeper, began noticing human remains. No short amount of them either. Deep into the pit, there was a large mass of human remains covering the entirety of the pit. Bodies crushed and drained of blood, but still possessing intact eyes. Each individual was still alive, kept preserved by the life-sustaining compounds found within the water. The body stared at the sub and moved, attempting to grab onto the vehicle. The D-Class swore they were trying to say something, mouthing words to the camera of the sub. As the sub passed through the mass of bodies, it emerged into a completely dark, black clearing at the bottom of the pit. For a second, the D-Class thought he was safe, but then, a large black tentacle rapidly emerged from below and grabbed onto the Nautilus, dragging it even further into the depths. The D-Class screamed and panicked, but there was nothing he could do. The tentacle possessed a large cluster of eyes, mouths, and human heads seemingly grafted onto its mass. And then there was another tentacle, and then another. The Nautilus was pulled to the bottom of the pool. The D-Class's screams were still heard even as the picture cut out. Sometimes graphic body-altering images of the tentacle's features were visible on the screen, but most of the footage was indecipherable. After minutes of distorted, corrupted footage, the Nautilus was seen again, rapidly ascending to the surface. Somehow it had managed to escape the entity at the bottom of the pit. Upon recovery of the craft, it was found that the Nautilus was covered in a thick, organic coating similar to a black slime mold, but with dozens of eyes growing from it. The D-Class inside showed severe psychological damage and attempted to harm Foundation personnel. They were terminated shortly after due to being a danger to those around them. Following review of the footage, the Nautilus was to be dismantled and incinerated, along with the remains of the D-Class. A reinforced containment seal was fitted over the pit, with the intention of keeping whatever was down there isolated from the surface. But this was short-lived. After the containment seal was fitted, Site-40 underwent a massive communications blackout. Every device on site received an email containing a single image of a large eye taken from a security camera. The text beneath it simply read, "Found you." Some personnel who viewed the email underwent anomalous changes, growing new physical features such as eyes and other various growths across their body. The entirety of Site-40-R went offline, and the Foundation could not establish contact. In an emergency effort to do so, Mobile Task Force Gamma-6 Deep Feeders was sent to investigate. The task force's assault on Site-40-R was a daring effort, as the majority of the site was completely overtaken by tentacles, growths, and anomalous alterations. While numerous altered personnel were lost due to the mission, it was ultimately a success. Some altered personnel were able to be saved through extensive surgery to remove their anomalous growths. And after everything was said and done, the site was repaired and reconstructed without incident. Following the site's repair, there has been little activity from the entity within the pit, but the Foundation continued to keep an eye on the creature and the ecosystem of the anomalous marine life that live on the Bass Strait, never knowing what their next move might be, and always keeping in mind the risk that comes with dealing with these poorly understood entities.
The year was 1857. And the Second Opium War was raging between China and the combined forces of the English and French. It was one of the many bloody colonial wars fought over resources like tea, sugar, and the intoxicating opium poppy. It was a war fought by peasants and noblemen alike. One of these aristocratic soldiers was the noble Lord Theodore Thomas Blackwood, the quintessential English gentleman and explorer. While his fellow soldiers cowered behind cover, Lord Blackwood charged into the fray, shouldering his rifle and firing his pistol into the crowd of opposing soldiers. It was the Battle of Canton, one of the most crucial battles of the entire conflict. The French and English were laying siege to the city of Canton, also known as Guangzhou, to prove their military dominance and capture an important Chinese government official. Lord Blackwood led the charge on horseback. Every bullet seemed to find the heart of a foe. He was a true hero among men, a gentleman warrior with class, refinement, and style. and it would be thanks to his expert leadership and marksmanship on the field that the Allied European forces won the battle decisively. Lord Theodore Thomas Blackwood is a name that deserves to be counted among Lord Horatio Nelson, Sir Francis Bacon, and Sir Walter Raleigh. In addition to being a skilled and honorable fighter, Lord Blackwood is a consummate explorer, naturalist, and frontiersman. During his heyday, he traveled perhaps further than any man across the known and unknown corners of the globe. He made scientific, biological, and anthropological discoveries that should have reset the course of society forever. And yet, you won't find any records in the history books of Lord Theodore Thomas Blackwood, nor will you find any grand oil paintings or dedicated wings in British museums. This is because Lord Theodore Thomas Blackwood is a 4.5-inch telepathic neon sea slug, and he's known to the SCP Foundation as SCP-1867. While he would never admit to it, Lord Blackwood belongs to the species Nembrotha kubariana, also known as the variable neon slug. He's kept in a standard aquarium in a Foundation containment site, and is physically no different to any other member of his species. What makes Lord Blackwood unique is his powerful telepathic abilities, specifically the power to communicate by speaking directly into people's minds. And what's more, he's extremely talkative. But to what extent is anything that this anomalous sea slug says true? Or is he just like SCP-082 Ferdinand the Cannibal, a creative and pathological liar? It isn't committed to record how exactly the Foundation discovered Lord Blackwood. Perhaps a local aquarium worker worried they were going insane when they heard the voice of a 19th century English nobleman ringing in their ears whenever they were cleaning algae out of the tank. Maybe Lord Blackwood was found by SCP Foundation divers, who are constantly combing the ocean for anomalous creatures and activity. What we do know is that Lord Blackwood is an incredibly strange and mysterious individual. He claims to have visited locations all around the world and encountered rare societies and creatures. The Foundation was skeptical about a number of Lord Blackwood's more outlandish claims, on account of him being a sea slug, but he does appear to have the knowledge to back up his supposed experience. Interviews with Lord Blackwood have shown that he's extremely knowledgeable in the areas of geography, zoology, botany, archaeology, anthropology, and linguistics relating to his claimed regions of exploration, as well as more esoteric fields such as obscure mythology, mysticism, and cryptozoology. In other words, if Lord Blackwood hadn't gone on his escapades around the globe throughout history, how would he have come to possess this wide variety of information? The Foundation was getting frustrated and began to probe further into the personal life of the most interesting gastropod in containment. Lord Blackwood, under questioning, was always polite and amicable with Foundation staff. He seemed to display no real knowledge of the fact that he himself was a sea slug, going as far to accuse other people of being crazy or drunk when they brought the fact up to him. While none of Lord Blackwood's tall tales ever extend past the year 1910, he told fanciful stories of exploring the Americas and of his involvement in the Second Opium War on the side of the English. Naturally, the Foundation wanted proof. When they pressured Lord Blackwood on this, something even stranger happened. He gave it. The Lord told his interviewers that he would happily donate his collection to them if it gave them cause to believe what he was saying. He gave the baffled Foundation researchers the address of a cottage in England where they could find the secrets to his bizarre and mysterious past, and local agents in the area followed up on the information. Upon investigation, Foundation field agents did indeed find the cottage that Lord Blackwood had specified. It was being maintained by an extremely old woman. When questioned about her presence there, she said that she was keeping the house for Lord Blackwood, and gave no more useful information. Incidentally, it appears that this singular purpose was all that this old woman was living for. She abruptly passed away from heart failure 5 days after the Foundation commandeered the cottage. Whether anything truly anomalous caused this, we still do not know. At first, the cottage seemed normal, until the field agents discovered a secret basement housing Lord Blackwood's collection. They were amazed at what they saw. The basement consisted of zoological and botanical specimens, over 3,000 artifacts, a library containing over 5,000 items, and a functioning 1800s scientific laboratory. It took about 3 weeks for Foundation agents working round the clock in shifts to remove all the items from Lord Blackwood's mysterious collection. and what they found raised even more questions. The collection included, but was no means limited to, 116 unknown species of plants, 107 unknown species of insects, 28 unknown species of lizards, 23 unknown species of fish, 14 unknown species of amphibians, 12 unknown species of mammals, fossils pertaining to 8 unknown species of dinosaur, fossils pertaining to 12 unknown species of prehistoric mammal, and artifacts belonging to 29 unknown indigenous societies. That's a lot of unknowns. But wait, there's more. His collection also contained a collection of seemingly unknown firearms, including 3 wide-bore muskets marked as Dr. B.T. Moth's effective particle destabilizers, detailed globes of Mercury, Venus, Mars, and the Galilean moons, accompanied by notes detailing possible paths of surface exploration, a heavily modified carriage containing instruments of unknown purpose. A note attached to the door reads, "On the Fritz, speak with Henry," and a highly dangerous and seemingly anomalous machine that killed 4 Foundation field agents before it was destroyed on site. And when questioned about this little fiasco, Lord Blackwood responded, "I did warn you to be careful around my collection. That bloody thing nearly took my head off back in '97 when I found it." However, there was one thing recovered from Lord Blackwood's collection that was perhaps more interesting than all the others. 35 handwritten journals containing recordings of events described by Lord Blackwood in his grandiose tall tales to the Foundation researchers. The accounts are generally identical to the stories he had told, save for some slight variations and exaggerations on the part of Blackwood in the retelling. Most interestingly of all of these journals have been dated to the appropriate time period of the events described by Foundation scientists. While his stories are too numerous to all be shared here, there's one that perfectly sums them all up. Lord Blackwood's account of a possible encounter with SCP-1000, also known as Bigfoot, in Seattle during the mid-1800s. Lord Blackwood, seeking to explore the so-called New World of North America, embarked with an assistant and an indigenous American guide to the Pacific Northwest in search of the legendary Sasquatch. The trio was headed for Mount Rainier, then known as Tahoma. During the journey, Lord Blackwood found a young fox caught in a trap that had been set by a local tribe. He took sympathy on the animal and freed it, allowing it to run away to safety. That night, he and his assistant met up with the rest of his guide's tribe, and they settled down for the evening. However, things took a disastrous turn when the camp was raided by a rival tribe. Almost everyone was slaughtered in the process, and Lord Blackwood and his 2 companions were hauled away by the enemy tribe for a sinister purpose: sacrifice to a violent local deity. As it turns out, the creature that this tribe worshipped was the very same one Lord Blackwood and the others were trying to find, a particularly large and aggressive Sasquatch. Each night, a different sacrifice was made to the Sasquatch. The victim would be placed near a forest clearing while the tribe played a primal song, and the Sasquatch would emerge from the trees to devour its prey. The first night, it ate the assistant. The next night, it ate the guide. And then, it became time for the sacrifice of Lord Blackwood himself. As Blackwood was presented for sacrifice, he accepted his fate. But instead of the Sasquatch, a legion of woodland animals emerged from the trees: foxes, elks, raccoons, and more, themselves painted with tribal symbols. The animals seemed to be on Lord Blackwood's side, and attacked the tribespeople who had been holding him captive, giving Blackwood the chance to flee into the forest during the chaos. Later, these same animals would find Blackwood again, and present him with things his captors had stolen from him. An elder fox also gave him a letter, proclaiming him a knight of their people now. He was allowed safe passage back to a nearby settlement, at which point he wrote to his financiers back in England, explaining the situation and asking for more money to perform further expeditions into the Tahoma region. The whole incident had only increased his thirst for adventure and exploration. Whether this tale is actually true, or just a bizarre colonial fantasy from the pathological mind of a telepathic sea slug, we may never know. But it doesn't make it any less interesting. To this day, Lord Blackwood continues to be a perplexing but fascinating anomaly. He may not be the most dangerous, and he may not be the most useful either, but there's no denying that perhaps we'd all like to sit next to his tank for a couple hours one day, and hear him spin a good yarn over a warm cup of tea. Diego had only just found his footing when it gave out underneath him again. Crashing to the ground, he threw both arms over his head just in time to protect his skull from the rain of boulders that came down past him. They grazed his arms and jarred painfully against his muscles, but it was better than having them hit him in the head. Without a moment to spare, Diego got straight up to his feet and continued running back down the trail he had been trying to follow. The ground shifted and lurched in all directions under him, threatening to throw off his balance at any moment. Having lived in Chile his whole life, he had gotten used to earthquakes, but he had never been in the center of one like this. The problem was that the trail he had been following to get up here was disappearing fast as the dust swirled into the air and boulders landing all around him. He just had to keep running in this direction and hope for the best. There weren't any other options. But suddenly, he found himself running uphill. Stumbling forwards, Diego tried desperately to get his bearings. He had spent the previous 3 hours hiking up the mountains, so how was it that now that he had turned around and gone back, he was still going uphill? It was almost as if the ground was changing shape beneath him as he ran. Dust filled his lungs as he tried to wipe it away from his burning eyes. Yes, the ground was definitely going uphill, but it felt almost as if it was lifting itself up beneath him, as if some tectonic plates were grinding together, creating a new mountain beneath his feet. Diego lurched unsteadily and grabbed the nearest rock to keep his balance, feeling the ground lifting higher and higher beneath him. Then, all of a sudden, the cloud of dust broke, and he was in fresh air rising ever higher into the sky. The Andes Mountains stabbed out of the clouds all around him, cutting beautiful shapes across the horizon. He felt his own mountain steadily growing taller than any of them. He dropped down on all floors and clutched at the ground in terror as he tried his best to take in the shape of what he was now standing upon. How far would you go to prevent a cosmic-level disaster? It's one thing to save your friends and family from an armed murderer. It's another thing to fight for your country in a world war. We can even just about imagine what it means to fight for our planet, to save our species from climate change, to save our world from a meteorite. But what would a cosmic disaster look like? A calamity so broad in scale that it surpasses our ability to even perceive the threat. We could point our most advanced telescope into deep space and look straight down the middle of it and never know it was even there. And if that threat was not simply to the survival of humanity or planet Earth, but to the survival of existence itself, how far would we go to prevent it? What cruel and inhumane measures would you take to have such a threat? Or better yet, how many people would you kill to save the world? This debate is raging right now as you sit here and watch this video. Not among the Foundation, but between two SCPs so grand in scale and so advanced in nature that the Foundation has no option but to sit and listen as the pair debate what to do with the human race. SCP-4568-1 was not difficult to discover once it started moving. In fact, it was almost impossible to ignore. Earthquakes have been tearing across South America for centuries, destroying homes, taking the lives of innocent people, and fundamentally changing the shape of our planet itself. What most people do not realize, however, is that the fault line running through the Andes mountain range has actually largely been dormant during this period. The source of the earthquakes has come from something far more mysterious. Our innocent hiker, Diego, had been spending the week walking among the Andes when the earthquake struck. You would be forgiven for assuming, as Diego did, that the ground rising beneath his feet was a new mountain forming as the tectonic plates clashed together. But the staggering reality of the situation was that he found himself hiking along the back of SCP-4568-1. As the creature raised its head into the air, Diego saw the head of a serpent lifting several kilometers away from him. Its body stretched and wound its way through the mountain range, filling the valleys and running beneath his feet. The scale of SCP-4568-1 is hard to convey. Measuring over 500 kilometers in length, this serpent is longer than most US states, with a 20-kilometer width. Standing on the back of it quite literally feels like standing on a mountain range. For context, the horizon at sea level is about 4.8 kilometers away, so multiply that by 4 and you'll get a sense of just how wide this thing is. Even small movements from this SCP are enough to trigger continent-wide earthquakes, with tremors being felt all the way around the world. Upon the initial discovery of this SCP, the Foundation was unable to determine why it remains dormant for such long periods and seems to only awaken sporadically and for brief periods of time. That was, until SCP-4568-2 was discovered. It is little wonder that the second Serpent took so long to be found. Its body is comprised almost entirely of water, sand, algae, and steam. It does not show up on sonar scans and is incredibly difficult to detect in the water, even visually. Its form is loosely defined whilst dormant, with broadly similar measurements to SCP-4568-1. This serpent roams the South Pacific Ocean. Any marine creatures that swim into the SCP's body find themselves undergoing beneficial mutations. Crabs grow extra pinchers, bottom feeders grow larger mouths, and sharks find themselves developing heightened senses and even extra hearts. These marine animals seem to undergo virtually no distress and are free to exit and re-enter the SCP's body at any point. Initially, SCP-4568-2 was believed to be the peaceful one of the pair. Both serpents seemed to become active at the same time. While on land, SCP-4568-1 would wreak havoc with magnitude 7 earthquakes in major metropolitan areas. The sea serpent's function was less well understood. Employing resonant frequencies and vibrations, this SCP was able to give its watery body a distinct form as it rose up from the ocean and towered above the waves. In order to maintain its shape and control its movements, this SCP employed a huge amount of energy. However, the Foundation quickly observed that it was rarely able to maintain its form for very long. As soon as the sea serpent rose out of the water, its mountainous twin would begin to move, sending tremors around the world that disrupted the frequency needed for SCP-4568-2 to remain animate. Exhausted and unable to maintain its shape, the sea serpent would fall into another period of dormancy, gliding lazily through the oceans. But this dormancy suited the Foundation. Without the constant seismic tremors, researchers could work fast. 2 operating bases were set up to monitor each SCP. 2 mirrored bases with mirrored teams in constant communication with one another. As soon as one team made a discovery, it was conveyed to the others and vice versa. One operating base was set up high in the Andes Mountains, specifically designed to be as earthquake-proof as possible, capable of withstanding earthquakes up to 9.9 magnitude. Meanwhile, in the South Pacific Ocean, an underwater research center was built just above the seabed, with regular vessels drifting out into the unknown to gather whatever data they could about the great SCPs. Several early findings stood out. Firstly, SCP-4568-1 appeared to have a very different internal structure from its twin. Researchers initially assumed that the creature would be largely composed of earth minerals and rock, as its exterior appearance suggested. However, scans of its body indicated the presence of what can only be assumed to be artificially created components. Great gears resembling clockwork structures and even rudimentary circuitry were present throughout the creature's body. The function or origin of these gears has yet to be determined, especially as there is no evident way that their movement corresponds to the autonomy and movement of the serpent itself. The far more striking discovery, however, came when the SCP Foundation discovered a way to communicate with the 2 beasts. Ultra-low frequency waves capable of traveling vast distances, even light years, were discovered to be emitted from the 2 serpents' heads at intermittent periods. The Foundation had to develop some of the largest antennae ever created to pick up these frequencies and interpret the data coming through them. What they found were 2 twins locked in a fierce debate about the fate of humanity and the universe itself. It was only then that the motivations of these 2 serpents started to make sense. In 2010, almost as soon as the Foundation was able to tap into the frequency, they were contacted directly by SCP-4568-1. Foundation,
I know that you can hear me. I will not apologize for my actions. I know that I am the reason that millions of your kind face their demise. I know your pain, and I feel it too. But I shall never apologize for it. I simply ask you to listen to myself and to my word cannot be translated. You are curious. You can be patient. Exercise that, and you may one day understand.
And listen, the Foundation did. Efforts to contain or destroy the two serpents were put on the back burner. Instead, Foundation agents prioritized spreading disinformation across South America and beyond about the source of these earthquakes. The two serpents are far too large and far too powerful to overcome or contain. Instead, the Foundation prioritized the use of amnestic drugs, disinformation, and the creation of fringe conspiracy groups to discredit any claims of the serpents' respective existences. Meanwhile, some of the most senior leadership figures in the Foundation were and still are locked in a fierce debate as to what to do with the twin serpents. By listening to the communication between the two SCPs, the Foundation discovered that SCP-4568-2 is intent on wiping out the entire human race. The only thing that has prevented it from being able to do so thus far has been the existence of the other serpent. Every time that SCP-4568-2 begins to mount an attack on humanity, its land-bearing twin triggers enormous earthquakes to disrupt its progress. But why would the sea serpent want to destroy the human race? As Foundation generals gathered in the deep sea operations base, SCP-4568-2 came to the observation window to look them in the eyes as it told them,
I am sure you can see it. How your world dies a little bit more every day. Mostly by your own hand, no? You poison the oceans, taint the rivers, blacken the skies. You do not need angels of death to destroy your world. But there is something else. I see it in the bottom of your eyes. Something unforgettable, unconceivable ideas cloaked in madness and impossible colors. Do you think I will let you drag the rest of the world down with yourselves? Do you think I will leave this world, my world, to die in flames? It sees your world, and it comes in fives.
Since this revelation, the Foundation has poured countless hours and resources into trying to identify a cosmic threat. For well over a decade, many of the smartest scientists the world has to offer have looked to the night sky, scanning for this impossible color, this shroud of madness, but to no avail. Some within the Foundation believe the serpent is lying, trying to make up an excuse to justify its genocide, but information from SCP-4568-1 seems to confirm everyone's worst fears.
Your minds burn bright, Foundation. All of humanity shines from this rock, like a candle in a dark room. It sees you. An idea exists only because something thought of it. Have you ever considered how such terrible concepts could have been given form? What kind of atrocious mind could even think about it? Humans cannot conceive the colorless green. What if you are playing into this creature's hands?
There appears to be an underlying implication that ideas are the source of power somehow. This colorless green, this unimaginable cosmic threat, seems to be a monstrous idea incarnate. But whose idea? Humanity's? There is a deep lore that the two serpents discuss with one another, one that makes little sense even to this day to the Foundation. They talk of gods and goddesses, deities of flesh, of steel and gears, and of the fives. Quite what these creatures are, if they are even creatures at all, is a mystery to the Foundation. Researchers have not discovered a way of communicating back with the two serpents directly. Attempts to mimic their language or transmit signals asking questions to them have largely been ignored. Instead, they address humanity and the Foundation as a whole, seeming to take the view of the human race as being a collective hive mind, one that they are evidently able to tap into.
The pair seem uninterested in informing us as to exactly what this threat is, or explaining who the gods and goddesses are. Perhaps they assume we know these things already, or more likely, they believe that our consciousness is not yet capable of perceiving the scale and depth of the concepts that they are debating. What is clear, however, is their shared understanding that if humanity were to be eliminated, the candle was to be blown out, this cosmic threat would pass by. The pair have names. Trenten is the land serpent, while remaining dormant much of the time in an enormous cave system beneath the Andes Mountains. This serpent seems keen to help the Foundation in some way. Kai Kai, the sea serpent, is intent on sacrificing the human race for a greater good, one far beyond our understanding. Speaking to the Foundation in the Andes Mountains, Trenten gave a short speech that served both as encouragement and a terrible warning of the darkness to come.
It is something I like about you, Foundation, about mankind. While it is easy to just take the simplest path, to just give up, there will always be some among you who refuse this path, who do the right thing. Maybe not all of you are this strong, but I can see it in your methods, those so-called containment procedures. There will always be someone who stands up against the dark, even if it takes 1,000 million years to emerge victorious. Maybe you can stop the fifth. After all, ideas can be killed with better ideas, even if it takes 1,000 million years.
We've covered a lot here on this channel, and what you might have noticed about the nature of our discoveries is that knowledge is best broken down before digested. Which is to say, if you are to learn how to assemble a computer, it may benefit you also to see one taken apart. When you do so, you'll notice in front of you not a computer at all, but a collection of individual parts. It's in understanding these distinctive parts in isolation that helps us shape our awareness of their marriage and how they cooperate with one another to become their collective self. Sure, this may be good in practice, but then tell me, how do we comprehend a whole that is composed of parts unwilling to isolate themselves from the rest? Because, let's face it, not all things, let alone SCPs, can be torn apart for the convenience of our study. No matter the subject we seek to understand, it may choose to resist our deconstruction by one way or another. Landmarks like the temples of Malta and the pyramid of Djoser are held together by our respect. Monuments like the Statue of Liberty are held together by copper. The family was held together by Charles Manson. But it's not always the preservation of history or elements of the periodic table or psychopaths that reject humans' wishes to disassemble. Far stronger than forces of nuts and bolts are that of character and loyalty, and SCP-2085 is welded together by exactly that. SCP-2085 is a militant anarchist organization consisting of 6 cybernetically enhanced individuals, A1 through A5, and B, operating under the name Kuroi Usagi Shiden, or more commonly known as the Black Rabbit Company. SCP-2085-A subjects are 5 adult female augmented humans, designated SCP-2085-A-1 through SCP-2085-A-5. Subjects are genetic chimeras, each with an estimated 6 to 10 different gene donors. They are fluent in Japanese, Mandarin, Chinese, Cantonese, Korean, Russian, and English, with additional languages varying by individual. Subjects display an array of genetic and cybernetic enhancements, including genetic splices of Felis catus physiology, that is, having cat-like ears, tails, and hair. These tails are prehensile and capable of holding small objects. So if you're accusing one of them of stealing your pen, don't just go searching their pockets. They also have grip pads on hands and feet, in case they ever did decide to retire from anarchy and take up surfing. Their impressive features don't stop there. If they haven't already put James Bond's gadgets to shame yet, just wait. Daniel Craig is about to look like Dora the Explorer. SCP-2085-A-1 through A-5 all have ocular implants with thermal vision, heads-up display, and recording functionality. Also noted are carbon nanoweave muscle fiber augmentation, reinforced endoskeleton, and brain-computer interface with internal hard drive. The list goes on, each etc. more elaborate than the next. Yet what stands out most about them is not a weapon, but an attitude. These 6 members, although now held in isolation from one another, do not show any signs of splitting up, not even when under the heavy pressure of the Foundation's interrogation. Agents spend their hours looking for cracks to dig their fingers into, trying to get one to betray the other and reveal sensitive information. But when asked to spill the beans, SCP-2085 screws the lid on tighter. They remain, as a whole, resistant to our deconstruction. The agents get nowhere with their investigation, and with each minute wasted, it's another victory for SCP-2085. The hours go on and they keep stacking up W's, building momentum day after day, growing stronger and stronger as a unit. As the Foundation tries to tear the group apart, they respond with even greater resistance. And this style of resistance is unique to each member. Imagine you are confronting SCP-2085-A-2. She is talkative, and so you think you might get somewhere. You are all ears. But what SCP-2085-A-2 sees isn't ears, but troughs, and she is happy to feed you her slop. She talks, and you listen closer and closer, but all you are getting is misinformation. False names, inaccurate stories, dates that don't add up. You focus and follow along, only to find yourself having run a marathon all the way to a dead end. Now you are faced with SCP-2085-A-5, who takes a different, more nonsensical approach. You are happy to no longer have to sit through inaccuracies to decipher truths, but now there are no truths at all. All that you are given are absurdities. She speaks in a way that makes you scratch your head, once saying for no apparent reason, "I take a hammer and I break my legs. I break 'em for the better." After so many scratches, you swear you've dug an inch into your skin. And so you move on to SCP-2085-A-4, hoping for better luck. She is straightforward with you, that much you like, but she's hostile and doesn't cooperate. When you ask her name, she raises her middle finger. She tucks it back in to create a fist, and then that fist punches the divider between you. No amount of reinforced glass could make you feel safe at that moment. Cracks spread. It looks like a web spun by a spider, and you feel as small as one. Thankfully, a protective shutter is lowered. Aerosol sedatives are pumped into the containment unit. She continues to try to escape, yelling profanities even harsh for someone locked behind bars. Your ears have taken a beating from curse words, nonsensical rambles, and heaps of misinformation. You want to lower your head into a toilet bowl and hear nothing but water. Yes, that is where these women have driven you. Your head to the bottom of a toilet bowl. You have put in so many hours, and yet you have learned nothing new. And if you can't learn anything new, you might have to rely more on what you already know. But what do you know? Well, you know this. Their track record is quite impressive. Verified operations include smuggling, theft, assault, vandalism, kidnapping, extortion, property damage, possession of fissile materials, corporate sabotage, embezzlement, identity theft, fraud, copyright infringement, piracy, possession, transport, and sale of anomalous items, and, of course, tax evasion. Yet, when grilled under the heat of investigation, they do not reveal any details about the nature of these operations. You just know that they happened. All that is told is that SCP-2085 navigates in such a way as to minimize the chance of civilian casualties and maximize material and morale damage to their target. They are proud of this. It seems as if SCP-2085 perceives themselves on the side of good. While their list of operations on paper look like crimes, they stand proudly behind them, pleading guilty with a grin. But behind every smile is more teeth. Teeth that go beyond saying cheese. Teeth hiding in the dark caves of a sealed mouth. And you are determined to play dentist and find your way in. But SCP-2085 doesn't say "ah" for just anyone. So how are you to understand a group that resists our preferred methods of learning? How are you to properly assess the pieces of a puzzle when the puzzle is glued tightly together? It starts at the top. Before you can decipher the motives of a nation, you'd be smart to study their leader. And if you want to extrapolate the schemes of a football team, you'd interview the coach.
And to truly know the moral of a television show, you'd be better off asking the creator than the actors. All of this is just to say, if you are to ever understand the complexities of SCP-2085, it is necessary you begin with SCP-2085-B, the person pulling the string of the entire operation for all of these years. Now you might be imagining a man of many muscles, someone able to fight a bear with an arm tied behind his back, someone who kicks through saloon doors, tilts back his liquor, and walks out with a woman in each arm, or a catgirl. But you'd be dead wrong. SCP-2085-B, also known as Wizard, does not look like an imposing lead at first glance, or even at the 100th glance. He is generally in very poor health, and his face shows it. He suffers from a variety of illnesses, most notably a vitamin D deficiency, acute radiation syndrome, and has unmanageable scarring from severe and repeated skin ulceration. He doesn't wear a cape and glamorous spandex often found hanging in superheroes' closets, but instead he wears an advanced crew escape suit, accompanied by a cheap bathrobe and flimsy red felt wizard's hat. He looks, with no elegant way of putting it, like a dork, a goofball, a doofus, you get the point. Furthermore, he is an adult male human with certain cybernetic and genetic enhancements. He has an adaptation of the gastrointestinal tract to allow for an all-liquid diet. Within his suit, an esophageal input port and waste output port are integrated. It is equipped with modifications to regulate sweat, reduce abrasion damage from extended usage, and aid in skin regeneration. His genetic enhancements include the replacement of 11 previously missing digits on hands and feet, and also has an internal drug pump, typically used for painkillers. Because, as we are about to learn, SCP-2085-B is most often on the wrong end of pain. Notice these modifications are not those you would find in a science fiction novel, but more likely behind the trench coat of a suspicious man in a dark alley. And we all know nothing good is ever concealed behind a trench coat. But have you ever wondered if that truth also extends to robes? Because when we pull open SCP-2085s, what we find is truly terrifying. SCP-2085-1. SCP-2085-1 is a fibrous mass of self-replicating carbon nanomaterials within SCP-2085-B's chest cavity, with growths protruding into the liver, pancreas, gallbladder, spinal cord, and left lung. The growth of the SCP-2085-1 and its consumption of SCP-2085-B's body tissues has been impeded through the addition of various containment implants used to sever communication between growth sections and control nodes and counter the replication process. SCP-2085-1's rate of replication without the influence of these containment implants is unknown. SCP-2085-1's periods of activity occur on average once every 3 months. The process lasts for up to 15 minutes and causes SCP-2085-B intense pain. Imagine a heart attack. Imagine Mike Tyson using your sternum like a punching bag. Imagine a cactus strapped to your front. This is the pain and torture SCP-2085 wears daily. There is no S logo printed on his chest like Superman. No symmetrically slick symbol like Batman. Instead, just cancerous growth. Kryptonite worn like a tie. The knot never to be loosened. But to SCP-2085-B, this anomaly is not just a number to be studied, but more so a being to be understood. It is more personal than a medical condition. It is something that he wakes up with each and every day. He calls it Red. At first, the Foundation saw SCP-2085's close connection with Red to be childish and silly, as if a small boy who names his freckles out of boredom and loneliness. But as you are about to see, how they met was more memorable than first finding a freckle in the mirror. A meteor struck down, and SCP-2085-B was the only person at the scene. Red was inside. As Wizard approached the meteor, Red leapt onto him and buried a home into his chest cavity. Far from a freckle on the skin, Red is a cancer. It grows and grows, leaching to what it can. It can't be removed with surgery. It can't be covered by a band-aid. It has no empathy or mercy. It leeches on and eats away
at its host. But it's more than pain that it causes. Falling off a swing set and bursting open your leg hurts, sure, but at least both you and your injury are on the same team. Cuts try to heal. When left alone, injuries make effort to find homeostasis. But Red is a different breed. It hates us in a way that injuries are incapable of doing. It has a deep disdain for humanity. It tears Wizard down, reveling in his degradation. Its sole purpose is to eat him whole. Wizard can only take this personally, as he doesn't just feel the universally understood sensation of pain, but also the unique passion of its purpose. SCP-2085-B's adventures with Red seem to be where our story begins, and what ultimately keeps it moving. In fact, it was while SCP-2085-B was running around trying to fix his chest with implants when he eventually met who we refer to as SCP-2085-A-1 through A-5. He was at the clinic to get some new parts, and when he was going through the installation process, there was an explosion. One of the 5 girls barged out of a building, guns blazing. He started running alongside them with his chest half open. The woman embraced him immediately and reciprocated. Knowing nothing of the situation, he instinctively knew to take their side. There were bullets coming from both directions, but he intuitively understood which side was good and which side was bad. A distinction SCP-2085 believes the world needs help clarifying. But it is hard to see a reason for a war when our eyes are focused on the casualties. Beliefs are less clear when tucked behind bullets. The sounds of gunfire muffle their message. Morality, while a complex subject, SCP-2085 believes is simplified by the masses. Events are deemed good or bad based on the term used for them in a court of law. When we see the words smuggling, theft, assault, vandalism, corporate sabotage, embezzlement, identity theft, fraud, copyright infringement, piracy, and, of course, tax evasion, it is our impulse to label those as morally bad. But SCP-2085 desperately wants you to look beyond the language. They want the words to dissipate off the paper, letter by letter, until all you have is a blank page. Now look at the pencil and the hand that holds it. Watch how it moves. That is what matters. Whether it draws weapons or mermaids is irrelevant. Both can be used for good. Both can be used for evil. Intent is everything, and SCP-2085 intends on making the world a better place, or so they like to claim, but maybe there is more to it. After SCP-2085-B and the 5 women escaped the gunfire, they went on to steal a boat and hightail it out of Japan. They spent their nights out there on the ocean, stargazing and stuffing themselves with instant ramen and cheap beer. And surprisingly, between all the crazy adventures SCP-2085-B had been on, this is what Wizard spoke about most: the time spent on the boat out at sea. For the first time in ages, he was finally somewhere where he was happy. It was this moment that actually meant the most to him. It wasn't the children they apparently saved from imperialism. It wasn't the wealth they apparently redistributed to the poor. It wasn't any good deed at all. It was the selfish, almost shallow sensation of being happy on a boat. This singular moment meant so much to SCP-2085-B. He reflected on it as if it were a wedding day or a memorable vacation, which makes you wonder. SCP-2085 has been investigated and interrogated, and all that they preach is that they are doing the world a favor with their antics. Their tales are captivating, sure, but is it actually storytelling, or is it just virtue signaling? There is an emotional depth to SCP-2085 unique to any other militant anarchist group. While they are genetically designed to most efficiently complete missions, they are not all robots fixed on the high of task completion. Each and every one of them wants more. They want a group. They want a group not just to have the numbers to overthrow a government, but to have the numbers to fill a room, or boat, with companionship. When they refuse to cooperate with you and leak information about their operation, maybe what you are witnessing isn't the strength of their loyalty, but also the weakness of their codependence. And so you decide this is the new angle you're going to take with your interrogation. You enter the room with a new focus. You feel like an earthquake. eager to make cracks in their core. You isolate SCP-2085-A-4. You are met expectantly with hostility. You fight back with psychology. You cross your legs and put on your glasses as if to say, "Let's talk about that anger. Where does it stem from?" She strengthens her emotional guard, but you keep prying. You say that it sounds like she is lonely. You say it sounds like her loyalty doesn't come from good character, but rather insecurity and self-doubt. You ask her if completing missions with her crew was actually a way to improve the world, or was it just an elaborate way to build a close friend group bound together by common goals? Did new missions sprout from necessity, or were they fabricated by fears of being alone with nothing to do? Were end-of-operation high-fives to celebrate good overcoming evil, or were they just excuses to feel the touch of another human, skin to skin? You stop there and let silence do the rest. SCP-2085-A-4 sits with her thoughts. She is ready to break, and finally, she does. She says she's willing to provide video logs of the group's former operations. She's ready to cooperate. She's ready to abandon loyalty to groupthink and focus instead on self-improvement. In exchange, she kindly asks that she be reciprocated and that the sanction placed on her be lifted. You come to an agreement, and with that, you feel like your work is done. But is it? You're feeling cocky and accomplished. You forward the video logs to an isolated network for D-Class personnel to review, and you sit back and enjoy a celebratory drink. You have infiltrated and broken the mind of a genetically modified radical designed for anarchy. You give yourself a pat on the back, and you're feeling so great that the pat might even turn into a massage. But before you can indulge in that deep tissue level of self-admiration, the phone rings. Can it be a call from the president telling you that you're the greatest investigator of all time? Can it be that they need you to pose in front of a world-renowned artist so they can erect a statue of you in the center of town square? But the panic on the other side of the phone halts your daydream. Your stomach drops, as if a sudden plummet from a perfectly vertical roller coaster. You have fallen into a trap. The video log at the center of your negotiation was not all it was promised to be. The file, titled backup.avi, consisted of a 2-hour-long video of a feces-filled toilet, presumably recorded from SCP-2085-A's point of view, accompanied by an audio loop of the folk song Koro Beniki, as performed by the Red Army Choir. Its absurdity feels like an art project, like a short film you are assigned to watch in a community college class. But instead of putting you to sleep, it does a whole lot more. The contained audio-visual cognitohazard induced anaphylaxis and exudative diarrhea in the observing D-Class subject. The D-Class subject died 4 minutes after initial access of the file from blood loss and oxygen deprivation. SCP-2085-A-4 sits in containment, laughing, while you sit there on your couch, dethroned, back where you started, having thought you tore SCP-2085 apart with your mind, only to learn that your efforts only reinforced it with more glue. Now go check out SCP-247, A Harmless Kitten, and SCP-577, Bullet Cat for more SCPs that'll melt or claw out a cat lover's heart.